Rumble. Various attacks rained down and crushed space as they arrived, and they caused the heavens and the earth to fall into chaos and seem as if an unprecedented calamity had arrived. Immortal kings were said to be at the supreme height of the three dimensions, and a single thought of theirs could destroy a large world. Yet now, a group of immortal kings had attacked jointly with all their ability and strongest immortal artifacts, and it was obvious how terrifying the might they revealed was. If it was in the past, Xianxia could only flee at the sight of such attacks. Yet now his combat strength couldn't be compared to the past any longer. He stood at the half-god realm, and it was sufficient for him to look down proudly and arrogantly at the three dimensions. He was superior to all the immortal kings present in the surroundings. Coupled with his extremely deep foundation in the immortal Tao and the Tao calamity sword that innately countered the inheritance of the sovereign sect, he was utterly unafraid of everything. Swoosh! Xianxia moved out. After he'd successfully subdued the copper coin of Treasurefall, he didn't have any worries left. At this moment, when facing the attacks of a group of experts from all directions, he naturally wouldn't be cautious and hesitant any longer. Swish! A myriad of strands of sword chi that were clear like amber bloomed furiously like lotus flowers in the heavens and the earth, and they were suffused with divine radiance. The sword chi sprayed out like rays of light, and they crisscrossed together as they raged through the surroundings. In an instant, the battle erupted completely. Kill! Xianxia's dense and jet-black long hair fluttered, while his entire body was suffused by divine radiance, and a myriad of divine talismans and talisman markings coiled around him. He was like a peerless emperor that looked down upon all and possessed boundless might. Bang! He tore through a crimson-red weapon with a single sword strike, and then sword chi swept out to directly annihilate this elite disciple from the sovereign sect, causing his figure to be split into two as he perished on the spot. Bastard! Someone charged furiously at Xianxia. Xianxia didn't even spare this person a glance before a clang resounded, and then the talisman armament floated up into appearance in his left hand. Xianxia slashed with the talisman armament and forcefully blasted the bones within that person's entire body into pieces, causing blood to flow from all 7 of his apertures while he seemed as if he'd been struck by lightning. His figure rumbled as it exploded into pieces, and a rain of blood poured down. Quickly attack jointly and stop him. The successive deaths of 2 elite disciples beneath a single sword strike from Xianxia caused many of the others to be shocked and furious. They didn't dare to go against Xianxia by themselves, and they chose to attack together. However, even then, they were still unable to trap Xianxia, let alone crush him. The reason was that, at this moment, Xianxia was too domineering. He seemed like a cold and murderous god that charged through this expanse of the heavens and earth with merciless sword insight. The might created by every single move he made caused all of these immortal kings to feel unprecedentedly oppressed. All of this came from his terrifying combat strength that was extremely rare in the entire world. Within the 3 dimensions where gods had ceased to exist, he'd already attained the utmost peak in it, and he'd stopped taking mere immortal kings seriously long ago. After all, he was able to surmount a realm and do battle when he was still at the half-step Immortal King realm, and he'd even annihilated Immortal Kings while fighting 3 of them by himself. Moreover, when he'd just advanced into the Immortal King realm, he was able to annihilate the Immortal Kings from all the various great powers while he was outside Tao Emperor Academy, and he reigned supreme amongst them all. Now, he'd already attained the half-god realm. According to his 5th senior brother, Li Fuyao, attaining this cultivation realm was sufficient to allow him to surmount a realm and do battle, and rival a true god. Presently, he was only dealing with some elite disciples at the Immortal King realm, so it was naturally easy for him. Most importantly, Xianxia had already attained the limits of the half-god realm, and it was an unprecedented height. He merely lacked the desire to advance before he would be able to step foot into the god-rank realm at any moment. Under such circumstances, could any immortal king in the entire 3 dimensions vie for supremacy with him? In less than 10 minutes of time, another 7 elite disciples of the sovereign sect had been annihilated. At this moment, blood dyed the sky red while the heavens and the earth had fallen into chaos. Even though he was tightly encircled, Xianxia revealed an arrogant, imposing aura of supremacy in the entire world. No matter what treasure it was unable to come close to him. No matter what restriction it was unable to obstruct his footsteps at all. No matter what technique it was, all of them were countered by the Tao Calamity Sword. If this scene was to be witnessed by all the living beings in the 3 dimensions, they would probably be unable to believe that Xianxia had trespassed into the sovereign sect by himself and fought against all the immortal kings there. Moreover, he was actually so domineering and overbearing. Since the ancient times until now, could anyone compare with him? Kill. The battle was still continuing. The expressions of those elite disciples from the sovereign sect had turned savage a long time ago from the slaughter she was carrying out, and they executed their trump cards. All of them hadn't noticed at all that their eldest senior brother, Huaikong, had left the battlefield soundlessly a long time ago and vanished. They didn't notice it, yet it didn't mean that she didn't. However, he didn't stop Huaikong because he was very clearly aware that even if he obstructed Huaikong now, it would be utterly impossible to annihilate Huaikong. Moreover, it would instead force Huaikong to remove the seal on his cultivation in advance and bring forth his true strength as a god. This was something that she wasn't willing to see happen for now. Or perhaps it could be said that he might choose to truly fight Huaikong only after he dealt with all of these elite disciples from the sovereign sect. At that time, these disciples wouldn't be there to occupy him any longer, and he would definitely be able to fully concentrate on the battle and not be affected by anything else. That kid has already stepped foot into the half-god realm, and he even possesses the Tao Calamity Sword now. Immortal kings will be unable to harm him at all no matter how great their numbers are. In the area above the 33 levels of the sovereign realm, Huaikong had an extremely gloomy expression, and his voice seemed as if it was squeezed out from the cracks between his teeth. When the sect priests of the sovereign sect, Elder Kong Zhao and Taoist Tuo Kong, who stood in front of him, heard this, both of them were shocked in their hearts, and they revealed solemn expressions. The half-god realm. The Tao Calamity Sword. Merely these 2 names were sufficient to allow Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong to determine exactly how terrifying Xianxia was. However, when they heard Huaikong had returned in failure, the 2 of them still couldn't help but be shocked. They were clearly aware of how formidable Huaikong's combat strength was. Yet Xianxia was still able to seize the copper coin of Treasurefall and utterly defeat Huaikong while in a tight encirclement. Thus, this obviously showed exactly how formidable Xianxia's combat strength was. It looks like even if the 3 of us move out against him, we'll be unable to harm that kid at all under such circumstances. Kong Zhao muttered, and his emaciated and gloomy face was suffused with strands of a ghastly aura. We can't allow the sect to be destroyed. If the outside world finds out that the 33 levels of our sovereign sect's sovereign realm were completely annihilated by only Xianxia himself, then it would simply be an extraordinary humiliation. If the sect master finds out about this in the future, then he'll definitely not forgive us. Taoist Tuo Kong's brows knit together tightly. Based on the current situation, we seem to have no choice but to utilize the strength of our divine Tao. But the sect master said that we can only undo the seal and head to the last day's domain after the sovereign sect has swept through the world and gained complete control over the 3 dimensions. It seems to be inappropriate for us to expose our strength in advance, right? Kong Zhou spoke with hesitation. As he spoke, he glanced at Huaikong, who stood at the side, and asked, "Could it be that we still won't be able to do anything to that kid, even while relying on the various divine restrictions the sect master himself set up in the entire sovereign realm?" "He's from Oracle Mountain." Huaikong sighed. It was merely a single sentence and just the words Oracle Mountain, yet it was sufficient to explain everything. Because in the entire 3 dimensions, if it was in terms of the Talisman Tao, then Oracle Mountain was the undisputed #1 sect. Even Nuwas Tao Palace and the sovereign sect were unable to rival it. On the other hand, Xianxia was from Oracle Mountain, so his cultivation in the Talisman Tao would undoubtedly be formidable. No matter how formidable a divine restriction was, how could it possibly trap him? So when they heard these words Huaikong spoke, Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong fell silent. Presently, an unexpected event has occurred in the last day's domain, and the passageway to the ancient god domain is about to be closed. Under such circumstances, it isn't inappropriate to expose our strength in advance. After a short moment, Kong Zhao pondered deeply for a long time before he spoke resolutely. "I'll do it." As he spoke, he stood up, and his blood-red robe fluttered as he turned around and walked off. "Never mind, I'll go with you as well. According to my knowledge, so long as the disciples of Oracle Mountain step foot into the half-god realm, then it would be sufficient for them to rival existences at the god-rank realm. If it's merely you alone, then you would probably be unable to do anything to him in a short period of time, and you'll be noticed by the divine chains of order instead before being forcefully dragged into the last day's domain." Taoist Tuo Kong let out a long sigh before he stood up as well. He wasn't exaggerating, because once their strengths at the god-rank realm were exposed, then it meant that the door in the sky above the universe would notice their cultivation, and it would send down the divine chains of order to forcefully restrain them. Even if they were great figures of the sovereign sect, they were unable to avoid being forcefully restrained by the divine chains of order. This meant that once they undid the seals on their cultivations and recovered their strengths at the god-rank realm, they had to annihilate Xianxia in a short period of time. Otherwise, once time passed, then they would probably be forcefully dragged into the last day's domain before they killed Xianxia. Just like what happened to Oracle Mountain's fifth lord, Li Fuyao, on that day. He'd attained the god-rank realm in a single step, yet he could only watch helplessly as Yin Huaikong fled because the divine chains of order were about to descend, and they forced him to stop in his tracks. Since it's like that, then let's act together. Only in this way would we be able to guarantee utter success. I don't believe that the joint forces of three gods will still be unable to do anything to a little bastard at the half-god realm. Yin Huaikong gritted his teeth as he spoke. He could be said to possess deep-rooted hatred towards Xianxia because he wasn't just suppressed at every turn. Even the copper coin of Treasurefall had been seized, and it caused his heart to be on the verge of bleeding. Most importantly, all the natural spirit treasures in Xianxia's possession were still on his mind. He didn't just want to reclaim the copper coin of Treasurefall. He didn't intend to allow the overarching heaven net, God-binding rope, 9 heaven life soil, and universe void lantern escape his grasp. Of course, this included the river diagram fragments as well. Under such circumstances, Yin Huaikong would naturally not stand by idly. In the 33 levels of the sovereign realm, blood dyed the ground while the sky had collapsed and shattered. Numerous incomplete corpses of immortal kings covered the ground, and they were suffused with a gold and brilliant color. It was the blood of immortal kings and the corpses of immortal kings. To some experts, these corpses were rare materials that could only be chanced upon by luck, and they could be utilized to be refined into treasures or even medicinal pills. It was even to the extent that the energy of the various grand Daos contained within them could be extracted. They could be said to possess boundless profound uses. However, in Xianxia's opinion, all of these corpses were extremely dirty, and he couldn't be bothered to utilize them. Pooh! The Tao Calamity Sword soared once more into the sky. It drew out an unfathomably profound arc in space, and when it descended, it caused another stream of blood to spray into the air as a head was slashed off by it. Zhang Lingxiao. This woman was ranked at the 5th position amongst the elite disciples of the sovereign sect. Now she'd been annihilated by Xianxia instead and perished on the spot. At this point, all 36 elite disciples of the sovereign sect had been annihilated. From the beginning until the end, merely 15 minutes had passed before the curtains to this battle had been drawn. In other words, Xianxia had annihilated all of them in less than half of that time. On the other hand, besides exhausting a portion of his immortal force, Xianxia could be said to be completely unharmed. If the news of such brilliant achievements in combat were to spread into the 3 dimensions, it would definitely cause another mighty uproar. However, in Xianxia's opinion, he'd become accustomed to all of this a long time ago and wasn't as excited as he was in the past. After one had slaughtered so many immortal kings, one would naturally become accustomed to it, and this was roughly what he felt right now. After this, Yin Huaikong and those 2 sect priests will probably make an appearance. As he stood upright in the battlefield that was an expanse of desolation covered in corpses, Xianxia took a deep breath while the killing intent in his eyes didn't reduce but grow instead, and it grew more and more blazing like lava. Sure enough, right when this thought flashed into appearance within his mind, a wave of fluctuation arose in space. After that, strands of extremely terrifying energy of the gods surged out like tidewater, and it swept over and drowned this expanse of the heavens and the earth. Divinity effused out and instantly filled the heavens and the earth. At this moment, all 33 levels of the sovereign sect fell into great terror. Everything within it wailed and trembled, and they seemed to be submitting, yet seemed to be on the verge of collapse as well. This was the true might of the divine Tao. This sort of might had already exceeded the scope of the three dimensions, and it was so terrifying that it was sufficient to rebuild the world, recreate the surrounding landscape, and transform the ordinary into extraordinary. It was almighty. Rumble. The heavens and the earth fell beneath a wave of rumbling. Space was unable to maintain its stability any longer, and it started to surge and explode into pieces before whistling towards the surroundings in the form of torrents. The heavens and the earth were in chaos. At this instant, Xianxia's eyes focused and a wisp of vigilance arose in his heart. Swoosh! His figure suddenly flashed, and it flickered through the layer upon layer of shattered space to move far away into the distance and avoid the pressure emanated from this energy of divinity. After that, he suddenly took a deep breath before the universe within his body started to rumble. The infinite divine talisman circulated at full strength while the energy of primeval Tao quintessence carried a surging aura of divinity as it effused out from within his body, causing his entire body to be suffused by divine radiance and coiled by a myriad of mysterious talismans. At this moment, Xianxia didn't dare hesitate at all to utilize his full strength, and he exerted all the ability he possessed after he'd stepped foot into the half-god realm. He was clearly aware that this battle would definitely be dangerous and uncertain. Since he'd cultivated until now, it was the first time he was about to vie for supremacy with actual gods, and it was even more than one. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Right amidst this expanse of terrifying chaos, space fluctuated as three mighty figures that were suffused in divine light appeared. Shockingly, they were Yin Huaikong, Elder Kong Zhao, and Taoist Tuo Kong. However, they were unlike before. Every single move they made was suffused with the energy of divinity, and as they stood there casually, they seemed like three overlords that controlled the heavens and the earth and possessed supreme might. Obviously, for the sake of crushing Xianxia, they'd undone the seals on their cultivations and recovered their strengths at the god-rank realm. Damnable bastard! You've actually killed of those junior brothers and sister of mine in that little bit of time. As soon as Yin Huaikong appeared, he noticed that those 36 elite disciples had been annihilated on the spot. This caused his expression to instantly turn gloomy as he emanated killing intent. He'd just left for less than an eighth of an hour, yet Xianxia had actually annihilated 36 existences at the peak rank of the Immortal King realm by himself. How could Yin Huaikong not be infuriated by this? All of these disciples were the central pillars of the sovereign sect in taking control of the three dimensions. Now that they died miserably here, such losses were extremely heavy to the sovereign sect, and it was even to the point that it had upset the sovereign sect's plans to sweep through the three dimensions. They were just a bunch of useless trash, so what if they were killed? Could it be that only your sovereign sect is allowed to act willfully? Xianxia grunted coldly. Even if he was facing three existences at the god-rank realm, he still remained fearless. Conversely, the battle intent within his entire body seethed and surged like lava, causing the imposing aura he emanated to grow even stronger. There's no need to waste your breath on this kid. Let's make the best use of our time and kill him. Kong Zhao spoke indifferently and casually. He wore a blood-red robe, and his face was emaciated and gloomy. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when his hand suddenly stretched out and slapped towards Xianxia, who stood in the distance. He's actually attacked just like that, and he didn't hesitate in the slightest. Rumble! His hand soared into the sky and enveloped down like an expanse of sky. The divinity that descended from it locked down the surroundings, and its might could be said to be boundless. Humph! Xianxia grunted coldly while his figure shot into the sky like a rock, and the Tao Calamity sword that was suffused with a surging blood-red glow soared into the sky. Swish! It actually broke the might of that palm strike apart. Amidst the divine radiance that erupted from it, Xianxia didn't retreat but pushed forward instead, and he charged towards Kong Zhao. It really is the half-god realm. Unfortunately, with this little bit of ability, you'll definitely perish today. Kong Zhao had an indifferent expression as his figure suddenly flashed. A divine blade floated into appearance within his palm. The blade was completely jet black and shaped like a crescent moon, and it was suffused with an aura of divinity that caused one's heart to palpitate as it slashed down. This blade was called Moonslaughter. It was a natural spirit treasure that was peerlessly sharp, and it was invincible before both gods and devils. Bang! The two of them collided head-on, and the energy of divinity rumbled. It was like a world-obliterating thunderbolt had erupted, and a terrifying aftershock swept through the heavens and the earth. Everywhere it passed, time and space were obliterated while all things perished. Under the might of this strike, the figures of Chen Shi and Kong Zhao just shook, and they were actually evenly matched. This caused Kong Zhao's expression to turn gloomy as he realized how terrifying Chen Shi's combat strength was. On the other hand, when Yin Huaikong and Taoist Tuokong saw this, they knew that merely Kong Zhao alone would be utterly unable to harm Chen Shi. Thus, they practically didn't hesitate to move out ferociously. They'd undone the seals on their cultivation and exposed their strength at the God-rank realm. So they had to make the best use of their time to annihilate Chen Shi. Otherwise, once time passed, they would be taken away forcefully by the divine chains of order. That wasn't something they were willing to see happen. A horsetail whisk that flowed with divine radiance and emanated a seething fiery glow revealed a myriad of mysterious phenomena as it swept over. It seemed like a universe covered by an ocean of flames that was enveloping down, and it possessed terrifying might. This was Taoist Tuokong's divine artifact, the fire cloud horsetail whisk, and it was a natural spirit treasure. According to legend, a quintessence fire spirit from within the chaos had transformed into it, and it was suffused with divine flames. Merely a single strand of these flames was capable of incinerating a large world, and it was extremely terrifying. Swish! A black, narrow, and long sword flashed through the sky. It was a clean, straightforward, and extremely simple attack, yet it seemed like a strand of sharp glow that came from within the quintessence of darkness, and it revealed a terrifying murderous aura. This was Yin Huaikong's dark calamity sword. Even though it was an artificial spirit treasure, its destructive capability was even more formidable than some natural spirit treasures. After all, no matter if it was natural spirit treasures or artificial spirit treasures, each of them possessed their own profound effects, and in terms of their overall might, it depended on the strength of the expert that utilized the divine artifact. For example, the Dark Calamity Sword was refined by the sect master of the sovereign sect after exhausting 10,000 years to collect precious treasures throughout the world. Its destructive capability was so formidable that it was not inferior to Kong Zhao's Moonslaughter and Tuokong's Firecloud Horsetail Whisk. At this instant, Yin Huaikong and Taoist Tuokong had moved out in unison, and they'd withdrawn their respective divine artifacts to attack Chen Shi. It seemed as if any other ordinary immortal king was in Chen Shi's place, that immortal king would probably be powerless to resist them before being scared out of his wits. Chen Shi similarly felt extraordinarily pressured, but under the effect of this pressure, not only did he not evade, he took the initiative to charge forward once more. Swoosh! Swoosh! In his right hand, the Tao Calamity Sword swept out, and it emanated a myriad of clear-colored sword lotuses that covered the heavens and the earth. In his left hand, the talisman armament swept through the sky, and it revealed numerous divine talisman diagrams as it shot through the sky. The attacks of the two swords respectively collided head-on with Taoist Tuokong and Yin Huaikong. In an instant, rumbling resounded throughout the heavens and the earth, and it was like a myriad of mountains had simultaneously collided and collapsed into pieces at this moment. Stomp! 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 Chen Shi's figure shook as he uncontrollably took 3 steps back in space. Moreover, every step he took caused space to shatter into pieces and numerous black holes split open within space. On the other hand, Yin Huaikong and Taoist Tuokong didn't move a single step, and they were completely unharmed. Obviously, Chen Shi was clearly in a disadvantageous position during this collision, and he was struck to the point of moving backwards. Kill! Attack together! We can't let this drag on any longer. When they saw this, Yin Huaikong, Taoist Tuokong, and Elder Kong Zhao, who possessed extremely abundant combat experience, grabbed onto this opportunity to attack jointly once more, and they intended to annihilate Chun Shi in one go. It was right at this moment that a wisp of a faint smile suffused the corners of Chun Shi's mouth instead. Even though he was in a disadvantageous position earlier, he'd already resisted the joint attacks of two gods after all. Moreover, it was under the condition that it was a head-on collision. This allowed Chun Shi, who was fighting existences at the god rank realm for the first time, to finally realize that merely based on his current combat strength, he was indeed already capable of surmounting a realm and fighting existences at the god rank realm. This was more than enough. Rumble. The battle erupted completely. Chun Shi fell into a disadvantageous position as he was vying for supremacy against three gods all by himself. They transformed the entire sovereign realm into a battlefield, and they fought up to the sky and down to the earth. They fought to the point even the heavens, earth, sun, and moon dimmed down and were lusterless. Such a rare scene of battle truly made it seem as if they'd returned to the primeval times when the gods fought for supremacy, and it revealed all sorts of tragic and terrifying phenomena. If there was someone else here, that person would definitely be extremely moved by Chun Shi's combat strength, because he was actually able to fight three gods head-on to such an extent while at the half-god realm. Even if Chun Shi lost in the end, it would still be sufficient for him to be considered as possessing peerless combat strength that shone through the ages, and it would shock all the living beings of the three dimensions. After a short while, the situation of the battle started to become disadvantageous for Chun Shi. He was going against three existences at the god rank realm after all. Moreover, they possessed various divine artifacts and possessed supreme divine might. So when they fought at full force, it was obvious how terrifying they were. Even if it was a true god that was fighting them, that god would find them difficult to resist. On the other hand, even though Chun Shi had stepped foot into the half-god realm, possessed the ability to surmount a realm and do battle, and possessed a combat strength that could rival the god rank realm, he wasn't only facing a single expert at the god rank realm. There were three. What did this mean? It meant that he wasn't just surmounting a realm to do battle at this moment. He was even undergoing a battle against numerous opponents at a realm higher than his own. Under such circumstances, no matter how heaven-defying his combat strength was, he couldn't avoid falling into a disadvantageous position along with the passage of time, and he faintly showed signs of being suppressed. However, even then, the combat strength Chun Shi revealed caused In Huaikong and the others to be extremely moved, and the shock they felt constantly grew as the battle continued. Less than a year ago, this kid before their eyes had only just stepped foot into the Immortal King realm. Now, not only had his cultivation broken through once more to advance into the half-god realm, his combat strength was so formidable that he was actually able to fight three gods head-on all by himself. Such a terrifying speed of cultivation was simply unimaginable and inconceivable. If he was given another period of time to grow, then wouldn't even existences at the god rank realm be unable to do anything to him? Along with the passage of time and as the battle continued, they were still unable to crush Chun Shi. This caused the hearts of In Huaikong and the others to feel even heavier. They had no choice but to admit that Chun Shi was simply a freak that couldn't be judged by convention, and he was a peerless genius that could be said to be unprecedented to the point that very few like him could be found in the world from ancient times until now. Such an understanding caused the killing intent within the hearts of In Huaikong and the others to grow even more blazing, and they pressed down step by step in a resolute manner with the intention of eliminating Chun Shi. As far as they were concerned, if they didn't annihilate Chun Shi this time, then the consequences would simply be unimaginable. In the future, Chun Shi was bound to become a latent threat that no one would be able to suppress. Kill! We must kill him this time. This kid is obviously trying to buy time. Once the divine chains of order descend, then this battle is bound to end in our defeat. We must annihilate this kid in one go. In Huaikong and the others spoke via voice transmission, and all of them had aroused killing intent in their hearts. The might of their attacks suddenly grew once more, and they became even more terrifying, causing Chun Shi to have no choice but to dodge repeatedly and stagger back. The situation started to become even more disadvantageous to Chun Shi. The battle was still going on, and it was becoming more and more intense. Chun Shi was utterly suppressed, and he could only defend himself and was unable to counterattack any longer. He was already in a precarious situation. Bang! After a short moment, Xianxia was blasted back, and his countenance turned pale. A strand of terrifying divinity had charged into his body, and it intended to tear apart the universe within his body. However, at the critical moment, the infinite divine talisman circulated and fiercely refined and absorbed that strand of energy, allowing him to avoid calamity. Swish! However, before Xianxia could catch his breath, Huaikong had seized this opportunity to arrive before Xianxia with the dark calamity sword in his hand before sword chi flowed out from it. Even if Xianxia had already dodged instinctively, he still couldn't avoid being injured by the strand of sword chi, and it left behind a bone-deep injury on his left shoulder, causing fresh blood to flow from it and dye his clothes red. The situation grew even more worse for him. Quickly! This kid is already on the verge of being unable to hold on. Let's kill him in one go. Huaikong roared loudly with a grim voice, and a wisp of excitement filled the space between his brows. At this moment, they'd already occupied an absolute position of advantage. There was no need for his reminder before Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong sped up the rhythm of their attacks. Die! Kong Zhao roared loudly as the divine blade, Moon Slaughter, within his hand slashed down. Rumble! But right at this moment, Xianxia's figure flashed as he suddenly utilized the 9 heaven life soil to envelop his entire body and obstruct this terrifying strike. However, his entire body was blasted back once more, and his figure staggered. The 9 heaven life soil. Huaikong's eyes instantly turned red, and they were filled with extreme greed. Moreover, the gaze he shot at Xianxia seemed as if he was staring at an extremely enormous treasure vault. He suddenly flashed forward with sword in hand, and he intended to seize the 9 heaven life soil. At practically the exact same moment, Xianxia withdrew the god-binding rope and suddenly restrained Huaikong. However, before he could annihilate Huaikong, he was blasted back by Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong, who launched a pincer attack against him from both sides. On the other hand, Huaikong seized this opportunity to struggle free of the god-binding rope's restraint. Xianxia was helpless towards this and could only evade once more. During the next period of time, he'd successively utilized the universe void lantern, copper coin of treasurefall, and overarching heaven net, yet all his efforts amounted to failure in the end. On the contrary, they'd almost seized this opportunity to seize these natural spirit treasures away. However, even then, the situation he was in was still like that of a trapped beast, and it was growing more and more dangerous. Moreover, he frequently suffered injuries, causing his entire body to be bathed in blood, and his countenance was pale and practically translucent. But it was precisely amidst such a dangerous situation that Xianxia's expression still remained calm and composed. The battle intent within his eyes still blazed like seething lava, and he revealed an extraordinarily tenacious will and tenacity. This exceeded the expectations of Huaikong and the others, and it caused their expressions to turn even more gloomy while killing intent raged within their eyes. The time they had was growing shorter and shorter. At this moment, they were even able to sense that the divine chains of order in the sky that were originally in a deathly silent state had started to become restless and eager to take action, and they were on the verge of descending. If they were still unable to kill Xianxia before that happened, then the final outcome would be that they were forcefully taken into the last day's domain, whereas no matter how injured Xianxia was, so long as he was still alive, then no one in the 3 dimensions would be able to harm him at all in the future. Such consequences were something they were absolutely unable to accept. Damn it! This bastard is actually so difficult to deal with. Quickly! Even if we have to utilize a forbidden technique, we must kill this kid no matter what. Waves of loud shouts resounded. At this instant, Huaikong executed a forbidden technique. Divinity surged explosively throughout his body while his imposing aura actually rose once more. Rumble! At this instant, he utilized the dark calamity sword in his hand to execute an extremely terrifying strand of sword chi, and it caused the heavens and the earth to collapse while the world was filled with boundless calamity and darkness. It was like an eternal veil of night had descended, and it dragged the world into boundless darkness. This sword strike was too terrifying. She sensed a strand of lethal danger coming from it, and it caused the hairs on his body to stand on end. At this critical moment, a cold glow flashed in his eyes, and he seemed to have made some sort of decision. Swish! However, right at this moment, a wave of light fluctuation abruptly effused out from his body, and it transformed into numerous lotus platforms of light that enveloped Xianxia's entire body and blocked this strand of sword chi. It was Xianxia. At this moment, she'd actually made an appearance from within an immortal artifact in Xianxia's possession, and she'd executed some sort of technique with the intention of helping Xianxia resist this attack. This had exceeded Xianxia's expectations. He'd never imagined that Xianxia was still able to move arbitrarily, and it was already too late for him to stop her. Bang! The two collided. The numerous lotus platforms of light were blasted apart and sprayed throughout the sky like paper. But in the end, it was able to stop this sword strike. However, a mouthful of blood suddenly sprayed out from Xianxia's mouth after she suffered this blow, and she seemed as if she'd completely lost her spirit, energy, and essence, causing her to become dispirited and almost crash down from midair. Damn it! Xianxia's eyes almost split open with rage, and he swiftly stopped Xianxia's delicate figure from falling while a strand of anger that raged like an ocean surged out from within his heart, causing the blood within his entire body to seem to be on the verge of exploding. At such a moment, Xianxia had actually resolutely stood before him and had almost perished. How could Xianxia accept this? He was completely enraged, causing the aura emanated from his entire body to become violent. He seemed like a volcano that had been deathly silent for countless years yet was on the verge of erupting now. All of you must pay with your lives today. Xianxia roared loudly towards the sky while his dense and jet-black long hair fluttered, and his voice revealed boundless rage and hatred as it surged through the heavens and the earth. How shameless! If it wasn't for that bitch, how could you possibly be able to stand and speak now? In Huaikong's expression turned extremely unsightly. Executing such a forbidden technique caused him to suffer an extremely great backlash as well, and it consumed a huge amount of the quintessence of his divine Tao. He originally thought that he would be able to annihilate Xianxia in one go, yet who would have imagined that Xianxia would actually be able to escape calamity once more? Shit! The divine chains of order are about to descend. Right at this moment, Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong's expressions changed simultaneously as they gazed up into the sky. The veil of the sky had been torn apart there, and numerous thick, large, and icy cold divine chains of order were passing through the rifts and descending like winding black dragons. This caused In Huaikong's expression to suddenly turn grim, and he howled, "Quickly attack and kill this bastard!" As he spoke, he held his sword in hand as he charged once more towards Xianxia in a frenzied manner. The descent of the divine chains of order meant that the absolute advantage they'd obtained with great difficulty was about to start being destroyed at this moment. So, if they still didn't seize this opportunity to kill Xianxia, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Kill! Kill! At this moment, it wasn't just In Huaikong that had noticed the severity of the situation. Even Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong had as well. Both of them roared furiously in succession, and they executed their respective trump cards as they attacked Xianxia. From the moment Xianxia made an appearance and blocked In Huaikong's lethal strike to the descent of the divine chains of order, and then In Huaikong and the others attacking with their full strengths, all of this had practically occurred in an instant. It was quick. Too quick. If it was any other ordinary cultivator, that cultivator would probably be utterly unable to react in time. This obviously showed exactly how pressing and dangerous the situation was at this moment. On the other hand, at this extremely critical moment, Xianxia had actually placed Xianxia on his back in an extremely gentle manner, and then a wisp of resolution surged out from his eyes as he gazed at In Huaikong and the others who charged at him. Bang! At this moment, Xianxia's entire imposing aura changed. His entire body seemed as if it was burning while his flesh and blood became crystalline, and a myriad of blazing talismans swept out as if they intended to incinerate the heavens and the earth. His dense and jet-black long hair had suddenly turned snow-white while his body burned like a divine furnace, and his spirit, energy, and essence transformed into a perfectly straight stream of smoke that shot into the universe. His entire imposing aura had actually risen explosively and doubled in this instant. Snow-white hair and an imposing aura that rose explosively and doubled. The Yazi clan's godslaughter burst. The pupils of Yin Huaikong and the others constricted as they'd simultaneously recognized the forbidden technique Chun she had executed. Their expressions immediately turned grim while astonishment arose in their hearts. Never had they imagined that Chun she actually possessed such a technique. The reason was that even if it was within the current Yazi clan, such a supreme technique had long since been lost in the annals of time. Thus, this was the reason why they felt so shocked when they saw that Chun she actually possessed this technique. They were unaware that Chun she had obtained this technique by chance within the Dark Parasol's abyss all those years ago, and up until now he'd merely utilized it for a few times. Rumble. Chun shi's hair was snow-white as he suddenly took the initiative to meet them in battle, and the Tao Calamity sword in his hand soared through the sky and slashed down. At this moment, there was only boundless killing intent in his heart, and he desired to slaughter gods. Bang! 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 After 3 successive collisions that were extremely intense, Yin Huaikong and the others whom had arrived swiftly before Chun she had similarly been blasted away swiftly. They were struck to the point of being blasted flying, and they actually didn't have the slightest ability to resist him. The reason behind this was that after he executed the Godslaughter Burst technique, Chun shi's combat strength had risen explosively and doubled. What was it like when a cultivation at the half-god realm doubled? It was simply even superior to an actual god. Under such circumstances, how could Yin Huaikong and the others possibly be a match for him? Swish! Swish! Right at this moment, numerous thick, large, and icy-cold divine chains of order smashed down, and they were like winding black draconic shackles that charged towards Yin Huaikong and the others in unison. When looked at from afar, it seemed like these divine chains of order were assisting Chun shi to annihilate Yin Huaikong and the others. Damn it! Damn it! When he saw this scene, Yin Huaikong was angered to the point of being on the verge of going mad. They were just about to obtain victory, yet such an unexpected event had suddenly occurred, and it caused him to feel aggrieved to the point even his heart bled. We don't have a chance any longer. The expressions of Kong Zhao and Tuo Kong were extremely unsightly as well. The divine chains of order had already smashed down, so even if Chun shi hadn't executed the Godslaughter Burst technique, they already had no chance to annihilate him. Because compared to Chun shi, the might of the divine chains of order was the most terrifying to them. Let's go! Kong Zhao shouted explosively after he made the decision. No matter how extremely unwilling they were, Tuo Kong and Yin Huaikong could only choose to leave when they saw this. The reason was that with their ability, they were utterly unable to go against the divine chains of order. Swoosh! 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 The 3 of them soared into the sky in unison, and they intended to leave. You want to leave? Did you get my permission? Suddenly, Chun shi's icy cold and indifferent voice resounded from behind them. After that, a silver and brilliant rope tore through space and appeared out of thin air to obstruct their path. At practically the exact same time, the Universe Void Lantern, Copper Coin of Treasurefall, 9 Heaven Life Soil, and overarching Heaven Net revolved as they floated up into appearance, and they obstructed the path of Yin Huaikong and the others before smashing down towards them. Bastard! Do you think you can stop us? Yin Huaikong and the others were utterly infuriated when they saw this, and their chests almost exploded with rage. They attacked with all their might to blast all of these natural spirit treasures away. However, because of this interference, their movements revealed a trace of sluggishness. On the other hand, Chun shi grabbed onto this trace of fleeting opportunity to soar into the sky with the Tao Calamity sword in hand before slashing down with it. Swish! A myriad of phenomena appeared along with this sword strike that emanated countless rays of divine radiance. This sword strike was a strike Chun shi had executed in rage, and he'd utilized the extremes of his cultivation in the sword Tao. It was absolutely the most formidable sword strike Chun shi had executed since he'd started cultivating until now. It seemed as if the heavens and the earth were unable to obstruct or trap this sword strike, and even the Grand Tao could only avoid it. Its might was so formidable that it caused the expressions of Yin Huaikong, Kong Zhao, and Tuo Kong to change in unison. Rumble! They resisted with all their might, yet their figures were blasted flying by this single sword strike, and they flew out like kites that had their strings cut. Before they could even catch their breaths, Xianxia had shot over explosively once more. He carried Qing Shui on his back while his snow-white hair that flowed down like a waterfall fluttered, and his imposing aura blazed. His entire body was enveloped by boundless divine radiance, and the Tao Calamity sword in his hand let out a clear howl as if it yearned to drink the blood of gods. It wasn't just this. The thick and large divine chains of order that covered the sky had enveloped down towards Yin Huaikong and the others as well. It could be said that at this moment, the situation had already turned around completely, and Xianxia had grasped the initiative and a position of absolute advantage. "Damn it! I'll fight you to the death!" Yin Huaikong roared furiously. The reversion of the situation caused him to fall into violent rage, and he was on the verge of losing all reason. He actually flashed and took the initiative to attack Xianxia. Bang! Unfortunately, at this moment, after Xianxia had executed the Godslaughter burst, Xianxia had long since become an existence that Yin Huaikong couldn't go against. With a spin of the sword, Xianxia blasted Yin Huaikong back, causing Yin Huaikong to cough up blood without end. "Quickly get back here!" Kong Zhao and Tuokong spoke with anger and shock when they saw this scene, and they intended to head over and help Yin Huaikong. However, before they could even make a move, they were pinned down by the divine chains of order that covered the sky, and they found it impossible to struggle free. Swish! Xianxia seized this opportunity to raise his hand and make a throwing motion. He utilized the God-binding rope once more, and it transformed into a silver and brilliant light that flashed momentarily before vanished. In the next moment, it had already restrained Yin Huaikong. "Die!" Xianxia strode through space, and then suddenly attacked with his sword. "No!" Yin Huaikong was both furious and terrified. His pupils dilated while he felt a strand of great terror suffusing his entire body, and it felt as if he'd fallen into an icy pity. Since he'd started cultivating until now, he'd never imagined that he would one day be so close to death. Nor had he imagined that after he undid the seal on his cultivation, he wasn't taken away by the divine chains of order and would instead be on the verge of being annihilated at Xianxia's hand. All of this caused his face to warp while divine radiance erupted from his entire body as he intended to take Xianxia down with him. Pooh! Unfortunately, he'd overestimated his ability and underestimated how terrifying Xianxia was. With merely a single sword strike, Yin Huaikong's head was directly chopped off, causing the blood of a god to spray throughout the sky. Crack! After he succeeded with a single sword strike, Xianxia didn't hesitate to stretch out his hand and grab. He withdrew the universe void lantern, and it erupted with boundless divine flames of light that actually completely incinerated Yin Huaikong's corpse, causing Yin Huaikong's soul to be obliterated as well. Moreover, not even a bit of him remained. An existence at the God-rank realm had actually been annihilated by Xianxia at this moment. Strictly speaking, this was absolutely the act of slaughtering a god, and it lived up to the name of the Yazi clan's supreme inheritance, the God-slaughter burst. Bursting with energy, and then slaughtering gods. "Huaikong! Bastard!" At this instant, Kong Zhao and Tuokong roared furiously, and they struggled free from the restraints of the divine chains of order. However, it was already too late. Yin Huaikong had already been slaughtered beneath Xianxia's sword and had been completely obliterated. Even if the master of the sovereign sect himself arrived here, it would be impossible to rescue and reincarnate Yin Huaikong. This caused the eyes of Kong Zhao and Tuokong to almost split apart from rage, and blood even seeped out from the corners of their eyes. They were filled with extreme rage and hatred. "Bastard! You'll be brought into the last day's domain one day, and that day will be the day of your death." Kong Zhao roared furiously as his figure flashed and charged up into the sky. The last trace of reason that remained within him told him that once he stayed behind at this moment, then not only would he be unable to harm Xianxia, he might even follow in Yin Huaikong's footsteps and meet a miserable and horrifying end. "Humph! At the very least, you'll definitely die now." Amidst this cold grunt, Xianxia's figure flashed while the God-binding rope soared once more into the sky. A silver radiance floated up into appearance from it as it flashed and moved to restrain Kong Zhao. Bang! Kong Zhao waved the fire cloud horsetail whisk with the intention of blasting the god-binding rope back. However, resentment filled his heart because the divine chains of order that covered the sky had shot over explosively at this moment as well, and they restrained him. Needless to say, this was extremely ironic. The sovereign sect had always pursued the ideals of upholding justice for the Heaven Tao, and it controlled and utilized the energy of the Heaven Tao to bring calamity to the three dimensions. Since the ancient times until now, it had caused countless calamities and brought harm to innumerable innocent living beings. Yet now, as a sect priest of the sovereign sect, Kong Zhao had been repeatedly obstructed by the divine chains of order at the critical moment, and it seemed as if it was indirectly helping Xianxia instead. So, how absurd and laughable was this? Swish! Xianxia seized this opportunity to annihilate Kong Zhao with his sword, causing the blood of a god to spray through the sky and cover the heavens and the earth. Thinking of fleeing? After he finished doing all of this, Xianxia swiftly turned around while his gaze swept coldly towards the distance. At the end of his gaze, Taoist Tuokong had executed teleportation, and he traversed layer upon layer of space while fleeing with great haste. Moreover, he was about to flee from the sovereign realm. This fellow was rather extraordinary. Earlier, while Xianxia was annihilating Kong Zhao, he'd already silently turned around and left, and his grasp of the right moment could be said to be superb. However, he'd overlooked a single thing. He'd utterly never expected that Kong Zhao would actually be defeated so quickly, and he'd never imagined that Kong Zhao wouldn't be restrained by the god-binding rope and would instead be obstructed by the divine chains of order, allowing Xianxia to directly annihilate Kong Zhao in the end. All of this had undoubtedly provided Xianxia with a tiny opportunity. Bang! In the next moment, a thick, large, and brilliant strand of sword chi tore apart layer upon layer of space, and it chased up to Taoist Tuokong before fiercely slashing towards Taoist Tuokong, who was extremely far away. Damnable bastard! You really intend to spare no one. Taoist Tuokong sensed danger approaching, and his expression changed abruptly while his figure flashed swiftly. He tried to evade this sword strike, but as soon as he dodged, another strand of sword chi tore through the sky and arrived before him. This caused his expression to turn grim, and he had no choice but to dodge once more. Swish! Swish! After that, strand after strand of sword chi tore through the sky and arrived before him like they were cancer that wouldn't leave him, and they utterly didn't give Taoist Tuokong any opportunity to teleport away. Rumble! Taoist Tuokong had no choice but to choose to face them head-on. However, he was struck by those strands of sword chi to the point of staggering back, and his figure trembled ceaselessly in space. Every single strand of sword chi he resisted would cause his countenance to turn slightly paler. When he finally resisted all the strands of sword chi, he couldn't help but suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood, and his entire body felt as if it was on the verge of collapse. Fortunately, I finally resisted them all. He heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and then suddenly gritted his teeth tightly and fled once more. However, right at the instant he turned around, his entire body suddenly stiffened, because to his surprise, he saw Xianxia had suddenly appeared within his field of vision and was obstructing his path. You! Taoist Tuokong cried out involuntarily with shock and rage. Swish! It wasn't a reply that greeted him, and it was instead a strand of sword light that slashed down towards him. No! Amidst an extremely shrill and miserable cry, Taoist Tuokong's entire body was slashed into two, causing his soul to be obliterated. He perished miserably on the spot, and he followed in the footsteps of Yin Huaikong and Kong Zhao. The blood of gods rained down throughout the heavens and the earth, and it was suffused with a boundless bloody aura. The three existences at the God-rank realm that the sovereign sect had left behind in the three dimensions were annihilated just like this, and it was impossible for them to be resurrected. Similarly, this meant that after he'd stepped into the half-god realm, Xianxia had accomplished the feat of surmounting a realm to do battle and annihilating true experts at the God-rank realm. Moreover, he'd annihilated three gods in one go. If all the living beings in the three dimensions witnessed this battle, one could only wonder what they would think. Swish! The divine chains of order that danced through the sky had lost their targets, and they instantly became restless. They were like a group of headless flies, and they swayed without end as if they were searching for something. In the end, they actually locked onto Xianxia. Xianxia was shocked in his heart, yet he wasn't afraid. That day when he'd advanced into the Immortal King realm, he'd once drawn the attention of these divine chains of order. In the end, a divine chain of order had been chopped down from the sky by him instead, and he'd bestowed it to Wang Delu, Zhou Zhili, and the others. Now, he didn't mind seizing this opportunity and chop down some divine chains of order again. However, before he could make a move, those divine chains of order swished and vanished successively. They'd actually taken the initiative to leave. This caused Xianxia to be slightly stunned, and he heaved a long sigh of relief in the end. As soon as he relaxed, a strand of exhaustion instantly surged into his heart. The essence, energy, spirit, and immortal force within his body seemed as if they'd evaporated into thin air, and he felt empty and unwell. In merely the time of a few breaths, an exhausted expression had uncontrollably covered the space between Xianxia's brows. This was the side effect of the Godslaughter burst technique. Even though it was able to double one's strength in a short period of time, it posed an extremely severe consumption towards one's essence, spirit, energy, and even quintessence. In this way, Xianxia would at the very least be in a weak state for a period of time. However, at this moment, the side effect of Xianxia's utilization of the Godslaughter burst hadn't erupted completely. So, he seized this opportunity to flicker repeatedly through the surroundings and retrieve all the treasures in the battlefield. Of course, treasures like the Divine Blade, Slaughter Moon, the Fire Cloud Horsetail Whisk, and the Dark Calamity Sword had become Xianxia's spoils from the battle as well. Put me down. After he finished doing all of this, Xianxia was just pondering about whether he should seize this opportunity to head to the area above the 33 levels. Yet right at this moment, a gentle and chilly voice resounded by his ear. He instantly recalled that Xianxia was still being carried by him on his back. "Are you all right?" Xianxia stopped at an empty expanse of ground, and he put Xianxia down carefully while asking with concern. As he spoke, he carefully sensed Xianxia's current state, and he noticed her injuries weren't as severe as he'd imagined. This allowed him to instantly heave a sigh of relief. "I'm fine." Xianxia shook her head, and then she raised her eyes to look at Xianxia with a worried expression before she said, "Are you all right?" Xianxia's jet-black hair had turned snow-white in an instant. Moreover, at this moment, his entire aura was even waning at a shocking speed, and this caused Xianxia to be extremely worried. She was very clearly aware of how severe the side effects of the Godslaughter burst were. "I'm naturally fine." Xianxia smiled lightheartedly. Xianxia nodded. She had a quiet disposition and was reticent. Even if she was showing concern towards someone, she seemed to be extremely calm, and her heart felt at ease as well when she saw that Xianxia was fine. Similarly, Xianxia wasn't a playboy that was good with words. At this moment, both of them actually fell into silence, and they both stared silently at each other. The atmosphere seemed delicate, yet it was extremely harmonious, and both of them felt extremely steady in their hearts. It was Xianxia that was the first to break the silence, and he said, "Accompany me to the area above the 33 levels. Before I came here, I'd promised a heaven-devouring beast that I would help it reclaim a strand of its soul that's being suppressed there." Xianxia nodded, and she actually took the initiative to hold Xianxia's hand for the first time. At this instant, Xianxia's entire body shook while a wisp of warmth that couldn't be concealed surged out from his heart. He couldn't help but smile brilliantly at Xianxia and reveal 2 rows of snow-white teeth. After experiencing this huge battle, the sovereign realm was in an utter mess. The earth had split apart, the restrictions had been destroyed, and the landscape had been transformed into an expanse of desolation. Numerous corpses of immortal kings lay in pools of blood, while the air was suffused with a bloody stench. This scene was extremely horrifying, and it carried an aura of sorrow and death. During this battle, 36 elite disciples of the sovereign sect who were at the Immortal King realm had been annihilated, and not a single one of them had survived. Moreover, Yin Huaikong, Taoist Tuakong, and Elder Kong Zhao. 3 existences at the Godrank realm had been slaughtered on the spot at the last minute. It could be said that the elite and top forces that the sovereign sect left behind in the 3 dimensions had been wiped out, and it was impossible for them to bring disaster upon the world any longer. All of this had been accomplished by Qian Shi. Time flowed by, and the space in the surroundings gradually calmed down. Qian Shi and Qing Shui walked side by side. Qian Shi was tall and handsome, and his snow-white hair was like silvery frost. Qing Shui's jet-black hair hung loosely on her shoulders, and her appearance was beautiful and extraordinary. They were like a match made in heaven. In next to no time, the 2 of them arrived above the 33 levels. This place was covered in an expanse of chaos that stretched boundlessly into the distance. Only an ancient Tao platform and a pitch-black and dignified divine throne stood towering there, and there was nothing else besides them. This place was originally the place where the master of the sovereign sect cultivated, yet now, along with the descent of the calamity, the sovereign sect's master had left the 3 dimensions. Thus, this place wasn't occupied any longer. Swish, swish, swish. A chaotic mist surged and suffused the surroundings while emanating a swishing sound, and it was completely empty, causing this place to seem even quieter. When Qian Shi arrived here, he instantly felt a feeling of déjà vu. He suddenly recalled that when he looked through the jade slip his father, Chen Lingjun, had left behind within Iris Immortal prison. The scene here had been reflected within it. Within that scene was Chen Lingjun during a previous life, and he was called Tai Ling. He was the junior brother of the sovereign sect's master, and he'd once conversed with the sovereign sect's master here. It was also during that conversation that the sovereign sect's master had killed Tai Ling himself. There was only a single reason for this. Tai Ling wasn't willing to stay within the 3 dimensions any longer, and he intended to return to the ancient god domain. However, the sovereign sect's master was against this, and a conflict arose between them because of this. Now, Chen Shi had stepped foot onto this place, and he couldn't help but think of his father, Chen Lingjun, when he gazed at this familiar scene, and he thought of his mother, Wuxia Shui, that had left with his father. Have they already arrived at the ancient god domain? Chen Shi stared blankly at the surroundings for a long time, and he couldn't help but sigh lightly in his heart. The jade slip Chen Lingjun left behind before leaving on that day had revealed that so long as he took good care of the river diagram fragments, then their entire family would one day be able to reunite after he arrived at the ancient god domain. After I return this time, I'll recover from my injuries and then get to work to set out to the last day's domain. Let me see exactly what sort of place the ancient god domain is. Chen Shi took a deep breath while a wisp of a resolute expression flashed in his eyes, and he made his decision. Do you know where the soul of that heaven-devouring beast is being kept? Qing Shui suddenly asked from the side. After she arrived here, she'd been constantly searching, yet she hadn't noticed anything. Beneath that divine throne, Chen Shi raised his hand and pointed towards the distance. It was an expanse of chaos over there, and the aura of divinity whistled through it. The sun, moon, and stars rose and fell in the surroundings, and a black-colored divine throne stood towering within the chaos. It was brilliant, paramount, and represented supreme authority. Qing Shui was stunned. She'd noticed the divine throne as well, yet she'd never imagined that the strand of soul extracted from the heaven-devouring beast would be suppressed beneath the divine throne. As they spoke, their figures flashed and arrived before the black divine throne. When they looked at it from a close distance, this divine throne seemed extremely ordinary. It was completely jet black like the veil of eternal night, and it wasn't decorated at all. However, it was suffused with a strand of terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. It wasn't an aura possessed by the divine throne itself, and it was instead the aura left behind by the master of the sovereign sect that had resided on the divine throne in the past. It was indistinct, obscure, supremely dignified, and brilliant to the point of being impossible to look at from a close distance. Swoosh! Chen Shi didn't hesitate at all to withdraw the Tao Calamity sword and slash violently at the divine throne. When he executed this sword strike, he suddenly thought of the chaotic divine lotus, Tao lotus, and evil lotus. Now that I've destroyed the sovereign sect's sovereign realm, they would probably be extremely gratified if they were able to witness this scene, right? Bang! The divine throne glowed while surging and oppressive divinity rose from it, and it actually blocked Xianxi's sword strike. Swish, swish, swish. Before Xianxi could take further action, a screen of light suddenly surged into appearance from within the divine throne, and it transformed into the figure of a black-robed man. This figure seemed as if it was boundlessly tall, and it was entirely suffused by a boundless, dignified aura. He was like the overlord of the heavens and the earth, the exalt of all things, and he emanated an aura that caused even the world to tremble. The master of the sovereign sect. When he saw this figure, Xianxi's heart shook while his pupils constricted, and he swiftly grabbed Qing Shui's hand before flashing extremely far away. However, in next to no time, Xianxi noticed that this figure wasn't real, and it was an existence that seemed like a strand of spiritual brand. It didn't pose any danger at all. This allowed him to heave a long sigh of relief in his heart. Truthfully speaking, no matter how confident he was towards his cultivation now, he still didn't have any confidence to go against an existence like the sovereign sex master. Those that dare to defile the divine throne are definitely not members of my sovereign sect, and in the entire 3 dimensions, only a mere few people are capable of arriving safely above the 33 levels of the sovereign realm. An empty and indifferent voice rumbled and resounded through the heavens and the earth. The gaze of the sovereign sex master suddenly shot towards Xianxi and seemed like 2 divine glows shooting at him. Even if he was clearly aware that this wasn't the sovereign sex master's true body, Xianxi still couldn't help but feel a strand of terror when he faced this gaze. This caused him to frown, and then he took a deep breath and circulated his cultivation to fiercely eliminate this strand of fear. Only then did his expression recover to its previous state. Xianxi, is it you? The voice of the sovereign sex master resounded once more, and it was like a thunderclap and carried a strand of absolute confidence towards his grasp of the situation. Even though I haven't met you in the past, I've never overlooked any information related to you, and that includes your experiences when you were young. Your path of cultivation in the mortal dimension and your experiences in the immortal dimension, I've taken notice to all of it. Xianxi felt a wave of horror in his heart from this. He wouldn't think that the sovereign sex master was exaggerating and deceiving him because there was entirely no need for this. But why would the sovereign sex master pay such attention to me? This was the key reason why Xianxi felt horrified. There's no need to take it seriously. It looks to me like this old bastard is playing tricks on you. Qing Shui's gentle and chilly voice sounded out by Xianxi's ears, causing his heart to suddenly feel warm, and then he nodded to Qing Shui to display that he was fine. I have to admit that after you possessed the river diagram fragments, the other disciples of Oracle Mountain can't compare to you at all. No one in the 3 dimensions can see through your fate any longer. The sovereign sex master spoke with a voice that didn't carry any emotions, and it revealed a supreme dignified aura. Unfortunately, having your fate concealed means that it'll be very difficult for you to control your own fate as well. When he spoke up to here, he suddenly grinned slightly and spoke of something else. The 3 dimensions are too small in the end. It's like a cage that only restrains a group of tiny and lowly living beings, and it's nothing worth mentioning. If you desire to kill me, then make the best use of your time. Come to the ancient god domain. I myself am slightly interested towards the river diagram fragments in your possession as well. I hope you don't lose your life in the last days domain. Along with these words, the figure of the sovereign sex master grew more and more lighter before gradually vanishing in the heavens and the earth. Everything returned once more to deathly silence, whereas Xianxi stood on the spot with his brows knit together tightly, and he seemed to have fallen into deep thought. Why did the sovereign sex master leave such a strand of will behind? Could it be that he'd guessed I would come here since the beginning? But if he did, then why didn't he prepare some contingencies to annihilate me here? What was he trying to say earlier? At this moment, all sorts of thoughts arose in his heart, and they flashed through his mind. However, he was unable to deduce an answer that satisfied him. There's no need to think too much about it. The sovereign sex master was obviously utilizing a deceptive strategy on purpose. If you were unable to arrive here, then you would naturally be unable to see that strand of a spiritual brand. Qing Shui spoke in a low voice from the side. Xianxia took a deep breath and returned to his senses from his deep thought, and then he said, "No matter what, I have to make a trip to the ancient god domain in the end. No matter if the sovereign sex master's words were a threat or not, I'll kill him myself one day." Bang! His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when a wave of the sound of shattering resounded. The black divine throne in the distance had actually started to rumble and shatter into pieces. This was like a fuse, and it wasn't long before this entire expanse of the heavens and the earth started to tremble violently. Space started to become violent, and it faintly showed signs of collapse and destruction. It wasn't just that, at this moment, everything within the 33 levels of the sovereign realm was shaking. Everything was collapsing and shattering, and the heavens and the earth were in chaos as numerous terrifying rifts appeared on it. This doesn't look good. The sovereign realm is about to be destroyed. Xianxia's clear eyes focuses as she spoke with surprise. "Wait a moment for me." As he spoke, Xianxia's figure flashed and vanished on the spot. "Let's go." After a short moment, Xianxia's figure returned. He grabbed Xianxia's hand before he flashed away via teleportation, and he left swiftly. Rumble, rumble. At the passageway beneath the ruins of chaos, the heaven-devouring beast that was resting with its eyes closed was suddenly jolted awake by a wave of noise that shook the heavens and the earth, and it opened its eyes. It released its senses that swept out, and after a short moment, it suddenly cried out involuntarily with shock. "My God! The sovereign realm is actually moving towards destruction. How could this be possible?" The heaven-devouring beast was utterly shocked, and its entire body stiffened. The sovereign sex sovereign realm had existed since the primeval times until now, and it had suffered countless attacks, yet it had never caused any harm to the sovereign realm. Yet now it actually showed signs of being destroyed. Who exactly accomplished this? Could it be that human kid? Swish! "Let's go." Before the heaven-devouring beast could recover from its shock, it saw Xianxia's figure tear through the sky and arrive before it. This allowed it to instantly understand that all of this may have really been the work of this kid. For a time, tempestuous waves arose in its heart. He actually succeeded. Who exactly is this kid? He was actually able to crush the sovereign realm by himself. What are you still standing there for? Let's go. Xianxia frowned and shouted in a low voice. At this instant, the heaven-devouring beast actually didn't flare up, and it glanced deeply at Xianxia instead before taking the initiative to move. It moved its enormous figure that covered an area of 50,000 kilometers, and it carried Xianxia on its back as it charged through layer upon layer of space to leave. Outside Dao Emperor Academy, the atmosphere here today was obviously unusual. A dense mass of figures had gathered outside the academy, and they could be called a sea of people. Presently, all of us powers that residing within Darkombat City have come to an agreement, and we intend to launch a counterattack towards the sovereign sect today. Now, we're just awaiting Senior Qiu Xuanshu's agreement. Alas, Senior Qiu Xuanshu isn't Dean Xianxia in the end. I'm worried that he'll be unable to make such an important decision. There's no need to worry. This operation has already received the approval of numerous great figures in the academy like Wang Dailu, Zhou Zhili, and Shenyuan Pujuan. Presently, they're requesting permission from Senior Qiu Xuanshu on our behalf. Under such circumstances, Senior Qiu Xuanshu will definitely not refuse. I hope so. The crowd discussed animatedly, and they revealed hopeful expressions as they looked towards Dao Emperor Academy. In these past few days, the situation within the entire immortal dimension had changed. The forces of the sovereign sect had retreated successively from the immortal dimension and went into hiding. This caused all of those powers that sought refuge from Dao Emperor Academy to instantly feel hopeful, and they'd successively requested to launch a counterattack on the sovereign sect and reclaim control of the immortal dimension. Up until now, this sort of voices had arrived at an unprecedented height, and all of the powers requested permission to take actions as they weren't willing to continue waiting. Presently, they were only waiting for Qiu Xuanshu's command before they would lead their subordinates out of Darkombat City and launch a counterattack on those areas of the immortal dimension that were under the control of the sovereign sect. Dao Emperor Divine Palace. Qiu Xuanshu pondered deeply in silence. Zhou Zhili, Wang Dailu, Shenyuan Pujuan, and various other instructors were standing before him along with Wuxia Faming, and the leading figures of all the other powers like the Dragon Dimension and Phoenix Clan. All of these great figures had come to seek permission, and they wanted Qiu Xianshu to approve the operation. After all, the current situation in the Immortal Dimension was extremely good. The forces of the Sovereign Sect had gone into hiding, and it was the best opportunity to launch a counterattack. Thus, they were naturally unwilling to watch helplessly as such a superb opportunity passed by. Everyone, even though my martial uncle entrusted me with temporarily taking care of all affairs within the academy, this matter is extremely significant. Once a mishap occurs, then there'll probably be no one capable of bearing the responsibility for it. After a short moment, Qiu Xianshu sighed lightly. Actually, he really approved of launching a counterattack, but he had to consider too many factors, and didn't dare make a decision based on his own feelings. All the great figures couldn't help but reveal a wisp of disappointment when they heard this. They really understood Qiu Xuanshu's decision because such an operation carried great implications. Once they failed, then they would be utterly unable to give Chun Shi an explanation once he returned. If you want to take action, then do it. There's no need to hesitate at all. At this moment, a voice that was low and pleasing to the ear resounded in the divine palace, and along with this voice, Fan Yunlan's slender, graceful, and beautiful figure arrived swiftly. Seeing Fan Yunlan actually make an appearance caused Qiu Xianshu to be stunned, and then he hurriedly bowed to greet her. On the other hand, all of the great figures revealed a wisp of happiness instead when they heard this. They were clearly aware that Fan Yunlan's identity was extraordinary. She was Chun Shi's Dao companion. If this matter was able to obtain Fan Yunlan's approval, then it was equivalent to them being halfway to success. But doing that seems to be. Qiu Xianshu hesitated slightly. You're worried that it'll fail? Fan Yunlan directly interrupted him. Qiu Xianshu shook his head. Presently, the situation in the Immortal Dimension is extremely suitable for a counterattack, so it's far from being able to fail. However, I have no choice but to consider it. Then you're worried that your martial uncle will punish you for making a decision based on your own feelings once he returns? Fan Yunlan continued. Qiu Xianshu pondered deeply for a moment before he laughed bitterly and said, That isn't it. Then why are you hesitating? Fan Yunlan said, Once your martial uncle leaves in the future, you'll be the dean of the academy. You must remember that you can't be irresolute, hesitant, and undecisive when doing things because this will only cause you to fall into a dilemma. Qiu Xianshu felt extremely ashamed, and he cupped his hands and said, You're right. Xianshu understands what he should do. After a short moment, Qiu Xianshu led all of the great figures to make an appearance outside Dao Emperor Academy. When they saw this scene, the crowd gathered here instantly became excited, and they cheered without end. They'd already discerned that Qiu Xianshu had obviously agreed to permit the operation. Senior Qiu Xianshu, don't worry, we definitely won't let you down. Right? We've already sworn that we won't return until we successively reclaim all the areas of the Immortal Dimension that the Sovereign Sect invaded. Ha ha ha. With Senior's approval, I truly wish for nothing more than to fucking kill my way into the 33 levels of the Sovereign Realm and destroy the Sovereign Sect's base. Don't talk nonsense. The Sovereign Realm is extraordinarily dangerous. Since the ancient times, countless gods have headed there with the intention of annihilating the Sovereign Sect's foundation and base. Yet all of them failed in the end. You can't joke about things like this. Everyone spoke simultaneously and were extremely excited. Qiu Xuanshu's heart was filled with heroic sentiments as well when he saw this, and he was just about to speak when his pupils suddenly constricted before he swiftly gazed towards the distance. Bang! 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 Right at this moment, a wave of rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth resounded from within an expanse of space that was extremely far away, and it was like a thunderclap had filled the sky and resounded through the world. At this instant, no matter if it was those great figures within the academy or all the others gathered outside the academy, all of their expressions froze before turning grim, and their gazes over into the distance in unison. A shadow had suddenly appeared in the distant space. It covered the sky and blotted out the sun, and it was like a floating continent. That's Everyone gasped in unison because they noticed to their shock that the shadow that covered the sky was surprisingly an extremely enormous and terrifying variant beast. This beast was shaped like a tortoise while its head was like the head of a dragon, and its eyes were enormous like lakes. Moreover, its entire body was suffused by strands of monstrous immortal force, and it seemed like a primeval god of beasts. As soon as it appeared, it instantly brought a strand of terrifying pressure to everyone in the surroundings, and it caused their faces to reveal shocked expressions. At this moment, even Qiu Xianshu, Wang Dao, Zhou Zhili, and the others were shocked in their hearts. A heaven-devouring beast. That's actually a rare primordial beast that went extinct a long time ago during the primeval times. Damn it! What the fuck is that? Someone exclaimed with shock. Who cares what it is? It has obviously come with ill intent. I'll go exchange a few blows with it. An immortal king with a violent temper roared loudly, and then he charged out with the intention of fighting the heaven-devouring beast. However, before he could act, he was stopped by Wang Delu, who stood at the side. Stop! Haven't you noticed that there are two figures riding on that heaven-devouring beast? As soon as these words were spoken, it caused many people in the surroundings to be stunned. When they looked over carefully, they really did notice that two figures were standing on the heaven-devouring beast. Yet because the heaven-devouring beast's figure was too enormous, it caused those two figures to seem tiny like ants, causing all of them to have no noticed those two figures earlier. However, at this moment, everyone present in the surroundings noticed these two figures. Especially when they saw the appearance of one of the figures clearly, many people exclaimed with shock. It seems to be Dean Xianxia? But when did his hair become white in color? It's definitely him. He's Dean Xianxia. My God. He actually subdued a heaven-devouring beast as his mount. This is simply even more extraordinary than riding a dragon or phoenix. At this moment, even Qiu Xianshu and the others recognized Xianxia as well. However, when they saw the snow-white hair that covered his head, they couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, and they faintly sensed that something had probably occurred to Xianxia. But in next to no time, their attention had been drawn by the beautiful and extraordinary woman that stood by Xianxia's side. She had jet black and beautiful hair, a gorgeous appearance, red and tender lips, snow-white skin, and illusory starry eyes. As she stood by Xianxia's side, she naturally revealed an extraordinary and pure beauty that caused even the heavens and the earth to dim in comparison. The dean wouldn't have brought another Dao companion back, right? Wang Delu made a harmless joke. Because when Xianxia returned the last time, he'd brought Fan Yunlan and Chen Nua back with him, whereas, this time, he'd brought back another woman that was beautiful to the point it made others feel inferior in comparison. So, it was impossible to prevent their thoughts from running wild. The others smiled when they heard this, and they knew that Wang Delu was joking. You're right. However, to their surprise, Qiu Xianshu sighed lightly and said, That really is my martial uncle's Dao companion. She's called Qing Shui, and she's an heir of Nuwas Dao Palace. They'd already become Dao companions a long time ago while they were in the mortal dimensions. Moreover, they even have a son called Chen, and all of the others were astounded. It's actually true. Rumble. Right at this moment, the enormous figure of the heaven-devouring beast enveloped down, and it stopped in the sky. Xianxia and Qing Shui leaped down from it and arrived by the side of Qiu Xianshu and the others. Dean, martial uncle. All of the others seemed as if they'd awakened from a dream, and they hurriedly bowed. The crowd gathered outside the academy bowed in unison as well, and they greeted Xianxia loudly. For a time, Xianxia's name resounded throughout the heavens and the earth, and this scene was extremely grand. It was the first time that Qing Shui had encountered such a scene, and she couldn't help but move closer to Qianxia because she possessed a quiet disposition, and she didn't like being the center of attention. Qianxia patted her on the shoulder, and then he said to Qiu Xianshu and the others, What are all of you doing? As he spoke, he swept all the others outside the academy with his gaze, and he couldn't help but frown. Qiu Xianshu hurriedly told Qianxia the reason upon hearing this, and as he finished speaking, he added, Martial uncle, now that you've returned, please make a decision with regards to this matter. After he heard all of this, Xianxia was stunned and revealed a wisp of a strange expression. Martial uncle. Could it be that there's something inadvisable about this? Xianxia noticed Xianxia's expression, and his heart couldn't help but jerk because he thought that Xianxia was extremely displeased by his actions. The other great figures gazed at Xianxia in unison as well, and they anxious and uneasy in their hearts as well. They couldn't be blamed for feeling like this. Presently, Xianxia's prestige was so great that it even faintly showed signs of surpassing the previous dean, Mengxinghe. Within the immortal dimension, he was absolutely an existence that was like the sun in the midday sky now. Even if it was Wang Daolu and the others who'd lived for countless years and were innumerable years older to Xianxia didn't dare act willfully before Xianxia, and it was even to the extent that a wisp of reverence filled their hearts when they faced Xianxia. The atmosphere was silent. The crowd outside the academy shot their gazes at Xianxia in succession, and they were extremely nervous in their hearts. Xianxia couldn't help but shake his head when he faced such a scene. There's no need to be anxious. I don't intend to object to this operation. All of them heaved sighs of relief in their hearts upon hearing this. Then what's Martial Uncle's opinion? Xianxia couldn't help but ask this question. Just do as you've said. Xianxia patted Xianxia on the shoulder, and he consoled. There's no need to worry about failure. The sovereign realm has already been destroyed while all its experts have perished. They won't pose a threat to the immortal dimension any longer. What? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked, and all the great figures cried out involuntarily with shock. The sovereign realm had been destroyed. All the top experts of the sovereign sect had been annihilated. As soon as Xianxia spoke these words, the surroundings fell into deathly silence, and the pupils of all the great figures including Xianxia dilated while they cried out involuntarily with shock. If someone else were to speak these words, they would absolutely snicker at that person and feel disdainful to even give it serious consideration, and it was even to the extent that they might humiliate that person. But these words were spoken by Xianxia, so its weight was absolutely different, and it was even to the extent that no one dared to question it, nor was there any reason to question it. Because Xianxia's status and identity in the immortal dimension now had predetermined that every single word he said would be like an infallible law or the truth of the grand Tao. The surroundings were perfectly silent. Every single one of them were shocked by this information and were unable to recover from their shock for a long time. Along with the arrival of the calamity in the three dimensions, the sovereign sect was like a shadow that enveloped the hearts of every single cultivator in the immortal dimension, and they were unable to eliminate this shadow, causing them to be unable to eat and sleep in peace. Yet now, right when they intended to seize this opportunity to launch a counterattack, Xianxia had told them instead that the sovereign realm was destroyed while the sovereign sect's experts had all been annihilated. So, could anyone avoid being shocked by this? At such a moment, Xianxia couldn't help but be stunned, and then he exchanged glances with Qing Xiui before he turned around and left silently. Along with his status and reputation growing higher and higher, Xianxia had long since noticed that it wasn't suitable for him to frequently make an appearance like he had in the past. Because along with every single appearance he made, it would definitely draw over countless respectful gazes and innumerable exclaims of admiration. Perhaps this was a rare and supreme honor to some people, but in Xianxia's opinion, it was extremely boring to him, and he felt lonely at such a high position. The sovereign realm has been destroyed, and the sovereign sect's experts have been annihilated. This is simply extremely good news to the entire three dimensions, and it's deserving of praise and cheers. My God, all of this wouldn't have been accomplished by Dean Xianxia alone, right? It was definitely accomplished by Dean Xianxia. If an existence capable of crushing the sovereign realm was chosen from this world, then could anyone but Dean Xianxia be qualified for the position? Amazing! Truly amazing! After a short moment, all the others in the surroundings seemed as if they'd woken up from a dream, and they exclaimed successively with admiration while cheering without end. At this moment, even the hearts of Qiu Xianxu, Zhou Zhili, Wang Daolu, Shenyuan Pujuan, and all the great figures were surging with emotions, and they were unable to calm down for a long time. After this deed, could anyone in the entire three dimensions be a match for Xianxia now? it wouldn't be going too far to respectfully address Xianxia as the number one figure in the three dimensions after the calamity descended. Everyone. Suddenly Xianxia took a deep breath and spoke in a loud and clear voice. The Dean has personally made a move, and he has already destroyed the sovereign realm and annihilated all the experts within it. Now, it's precisely the best opportunity for us to launch a counterattack in the three dimensions. I only have one thing to ask. Do all of you dare to join this fight? His voice was like a thunderclap that rumbled and surged through the heavens and the earth, and it caused the hot blood within every single person in the surroundings to surge along with their battle intent. Fight! 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 After that, orderly shouts erupted, rumbled, and resounded in unison before surging through the heavens and the earth. At this moment, all of them were rubbing their palms together impatiently, and they intended to sweep through the immortal dimension and reclaim their lost homelands. They intended to reclaim the control of the entire immortal dimension from the sovereign sect. Depart! Xianxia shouted loudly. On this day, all the various powers allied to Dao Emperor Academy had left Dark Combat City with all the great figures of the various powers in the lead, and they launched a counterattack. The impetus of this was so vast that it shocked the entire immortal dimension, and it caused all the myriad of living beings in the immortal dimension to be extremely excited. It was also on this day that the news of Xianxia trespassing into the sovereign realm by himself, crushing the 33 levels of the sovereign realm, and annihilating all the experts of the sovereign sect had spread at a shocking speed. It was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, and it caused an unprecedentedly mighty uproar in the immortal dimension, whereas Xianxia's name had even become the topic that everyone took delight in discussing. Xianxia's reputation had already risen to the height of being the number one expert in the three dimensions now. It was unknown who had made this judgment, but it had instantly become the common view of every single cultivator in the immortal dimensions. Moreover, no one felt that this title was exaggerated. How many immortal kings had Xianxia slaughtered in these years? They were uncountable. Had a figure that could rival Xianxia appeared in the recent years? No. Had Xianxia committed any monstrous crimes in these years? Never. So, how could a great figure with a lofty reputation and strength that stood supreme in the three dimensions be unworthy of the title of number one expert in the three dimensions? After this title was born, it wasn't that there weren't people in the entire immortal dimension that questioned it. However, as soon as such voices arose, it would instantly incur public wrath and be fiercely crushed. It wasn't Xianxia that did it, and it was those cultivators that took action themselves. This obviously showed exactly how lofty Xianxia's reputation in the immortal dimension was now. The influence of the destruction of the sovereign realm and death of all the sovereign sect's experts didn't just stop here. After this day, the powers in the entire immortal dimension set out successively, and they started to join forces to eliminate the remaining forces of the sovereign sect in the various areas of the immortal dimension. In practically less than half a year of time, not a single disciple of the sovereign sect could be found in the immortal dimension. On the other hand, during this half year of time, Xianxia had been constantly living in seclusion and accompanying his loved ones. He lived a leisurely and carefree life that stood aloof from worldly matters, the world within the 9-continent divine cauldrons. The landscape was covered in gorgeous mountains and mist that curled up into the sky, at the side of a lake. Grandpa, I want to become the number one expert within the three dimensions in the future as well. A young boy around the age of 8 was at Xianxia's side, and he opened his eyes wide while swinging his tiny arm and speaking with a firm tone. This little fellow was exactly Chen Hao's grandson, Chen Baobao. He looked dignified and strong, and he had a lively pair of eyes. He was young and cute. Xianxia roared with laughter and teased. So, in this way, you intend to kick Grandpa off his throne? Chen Baobao smiled slyly without end, and he was extremely amused. Humph, Grandpa. Don't pay any attention to him. He's talking big again. Chen Yunyun grunted from the side. She was a few years older than Chen Baobao, and she was at her maiden years. She was slim, graceful, and pretty. Chen Baobao was instantly annoyed, and he glared at Chen Yunyun. I didn't. Wow. You actually dared to act fiercely towards me. Chen Yunyun's beautiful brows raised, and then she raised her hand to twist Chen Baobao's ears. It hurt the latter to the point of crying out loudly, and it was even to the point tears almost flowed from his eyes, causing him to loudly beg for mercy without end. Didn't you want to be the #1 expert in the 3 dimensions? Why were you begging for mercy? Asked Chen Yunyun. Chen Baobao said with a pitiable expression, I won't. I'll be the #2 expert in the 3 dimensions. I'll be the #2 expert in the 3 dimensions? Chen Yunyun asked curiously. Because with big sister Yunyun present, how could I dare call myself the #1 expert? Chen Baobao was a mischievous little fellow, and he was extremely intelligent. So he flattered her imperceptibly. Chen Yunyun instantly beamed, and she stopped making things difficult for him. Chen she grinned without end from the side, and he really enjoyed being with his family. During this half-year of time he brought Qing Shui, Fan Yunlan, and Chen Nua into the world within he 9-continent divine cauldrons, and they'd lived together with Chen Hao, Fei Lengsui, Chen and Chen Yu and all the others. Besides guiding the others in their cultivation, Chen she drank wine, chatted, and meditated on his cultivation in the heart realm. He lived a tranquil and peaceful life, and he paid no attention to the affairs of the outside world. Ha! Grandpa Ling Bai, play with me. Suddenly, Chen Baobao noticed Ling Bai in the distance, and his eyes lit up before he ran over excitedly. I'm going as well. Chen Yunyun jubilant as well, and she followed Chen Baobao. It wasn't just Ling Bai who was in the distance, Aman, Starry, and Bai Kuei were there as well. These 4 fellows strolled about the world within the 9-continent divine cauldrons every single day, and the little kids, Chen Baobao and Chen Yunyun, were deeply fond of them. These 2 little fellows forgot me as soon as they found playmates. Chen she rubbed his nose and was extremely speechless. After that, he heard a wave of voices coming from afar. Nua Chen is as old as you, yet he already has children now. Why don't you make the best use of your time to look for a Dao companion and give birth to a grandchild for me? Look at how cute Baobao and Yunyun are. It was Fan Yunlan's voice. Mother, how many times have I told you? I don't want that. Chen Nua's voice revealed an exasperated tone. Why? Looks like I've spoiled you too much in the past, and you won't even listen to your mother anymore. The pitch of Fan Yunlan's voice lowered. No, I'm just... Chen Nua said, forget it, unless you can find a man like father. Otherwise, I won't marry anyone even if you kill me. I'm going to cultivate. Stop right there. Fan Yunlan was exasperated. It wasn't long before Chen she saw Fan Yunlan walking over from afar with a displeased expression. He couldn't help but speak in an amused tone. Nua has grown up and she had her own views and thoughts. There's no need to make things difficult for her. Not to mention that few cultivators are willing to have Dao companions. Fan Yunlan sighed faintly and said, You don't understand. Chen Shi, so you were here. Suddenly, Qing Shui walked over from afar in snow-white clothes and a tranquil and beautiful appearance. At the instant she saw Qing Shui, Fan Yunlan quickly restrained her thoughts, and her expression became tranquil and composed. The 2 women exchanged glances, and both of them didn't say anything, causing the atmosphere to become slightly oppressive. Chen she instantly felt as if he was sitting on a cushion of pins. In this half-year of time, Fan Yunlan and Qing Shui had met each other on more than one occasion. However, every single time they met, they were like 2 swords. Both of them didn't take the initiative to pay attention to the other, and it gave Chen Shi a headache. Father, I heard you'll be leaving soon? This oppressive atmosphere didn't continue for long before it was broken by a voice. It was Chen, and that had arrived. This allowed Chen Shi to heave a sigh of relief in his heart, and he said, Yes, you're right. Leaving. On the other hand, when Fan Yunlan and Qing Shui heard these words, they spoke simultaneously instead, and both of them had slightly stunned expressions. In this half a year of time, they'd been living in this world within the 9-continent divine cauldrons and stood aloof from worldly affairs. This place was like a paradise secluded from the world, and they'd practically forgotten everything in the outside world. Now that Chen and had brought this matter up, their hearts instantly constricted. It's almost time, and I can't delay any longer. Otherwise, that passageway that leads to the ancient god domain will probably close. Xianxia stood up and answered in a serious manner. Recently, at the same time he accompanied his loved ones, he hadn't been slacking off. He'd been preparing to leave and head to the last day domain, and now it was almost at a time where he had no choice but to leave. When are you leaving? Xianxia couldn't refrain herself from asking this question. I'll be heading to Dao Emperor Academy in the next few days, and I'll depart immediately once I've made arrangements for everything after my departure. Xianxia pondered deeply for a moment before he spoke. Xianxia and Fan Yunlan were stunned once more. He's leaving so soon? Half a year had passed since the sovereign realm was destroyed. Too many things had occurred during this half year of time, and the situation within the entire 3 dimensions had silently undergone a tremendous transformation. As Xianxia suggested, Xianxia had led all the great figures of the Academy and the various powers of the immortal dimensions to reform the order in the world and re-establish the central immortal court. All the various powers that had allied with Dao Emperor Academy as soon as the sovereign sex threat swept through the immortal dimension had benefited from all of this, and they assumed positions of control over the 4,900 continents in the immortal dimension. On the other hand, the control of the order within the entire immortal dimension seemed to have become presided over by Dao Emperor Academy. Besides this, the great figures within the Academy had branched into 2 groups. One group descended to the mortal dimension to eliminate the invasion of the xenorace with all their might, and they consolidated the order in the mortal dimension and rebuilt the world. On the other hand, the other group had arrived at the netherworld under Xianxia's orders. They assisted the Nether Spring Grand Emperor and the Queen of Judgment, Cui Qingning, to crush the internal strife within the netherworld and re-establish control over the 6 paths of hell, the 10 kings of hell, Granny Menghal, the gates of hell, and the river of blood, allowing all order to flow normally. It could be said that during this half year of time, after all the disciples of the sovereign sect that were left behind in the 3 dimensions had been annihilated, the chaos within the 3 dimensions was effectively restrained under Xianxia's absolute control. Everything faintly showed signs of coming back to life and reclaiming its glory of the past. Moreover, when faced with such shocking changes, the xenorace even sighed emotionally. The 3 dimensions has Xianxia to block the way. We've already missed our opportunity and can't do anything about it. In the end, the xenorace retreated from the 3 dimensions and hid in the outer realm, and they didn't dare rashly invade the 3 dimensions again. However, all of this wasn't the end. That door still stood towering in the sky above the universe, and the divine chains of order were still looking fiercely down at the world. This meant that this calamity that swept through the 3 dimensions hadn't come to an end. It was like a sharp sword that hung above all the living beings in the 3 dimensions, and no one knew when it would descend once more, causing everyone to feel as if they were sitting on a cushion of pins. The 3 dimensions has changed. In the sky above Dao Emperor Academy, Xianxia sighed with emotion. The chaos within the entire 3 dimensions has been eliminated, and for a very long period of time from now, it will at least not suffer the invasion of the sovereign sect or the xenorace. Xianxia nodded. During this half years of time, he'd been constantly residing in the world within the 9-continent divine cauldrons and accompanying his loved ones, but it didn't mean that he didn't know anything about the situation in the 3 dimensions. It was even to the extent that all important decisions had to be decided on by him. For example, sending the forces of the immortal dimension to the mortal dimension and netherworld or rebuilding the central immortal court were all orders given by Xianxia. Martial uncle, are you really going to leave? Xianxia gazed at Xianxia. I have to leave. Xianxia nodded. This is something that can't be helped. It's like an arrow on a bowstring that has to be released. According to my estimations, that passageway that leads to the ancient god domain will close in less than a year of time. During this time, I must arrive safely at the last day's domain. Only in this way would I be able to find that passageway that heads to the god domain. Xianxia understood what Xianxia meant, and he understood Xianxia's troubled. He couldn't help but ask, after you leave, what about the 3 dimensions? What about your loved ones? Xianxia had already considered this question a very long time ago, and he immediately said, this time, I intend to leave by myself. When he spoke up to hear, he turned around and smiled as he looked at Xianxia. You don't have to worry. If you encounter any problems after I've left, you can go look for Qing Shui and Fan Yunlan's help. Not to mention that besides the two of them, all the fellow Taoists in the academy like Wang Delu, Zhou Zhili, and Shenyuan Pujuan will definitely spare no effort to assist you in protecting the academy and maintaining the order of the entire 3 dimensions. Qiu Xianshu nodded. Martial uncle, don't worry. He was clearly aware that even if he wanted Chun Shi to stay in the 3 dimensions, it would be impossible. Because Chun Shi's strength had long since approached the God-rank realm, and once he takes that step beneath the calamity that has swept through the 3 dimensions, then Chun Shi would have no choice but to leave. Instead of that, it was better to act in advance, and he would even have a very large opportunity to locate the path that led to the ancient God domain. Martial uncle, look. Qiu Xianshu suddenly looked towards the distance. Miss Axiu has arrived. Chun Shi was stunned. Sure enough, he saw Axiu walking over swiftly from afar in a green dress, and a wisp of complicated emotions couldn't help but surge out from his heart. Since he brought Fan Yunlan back that day, Axiu's attitude towards him had changed greatly, and she'd constantly avoided him. This was the first time they were meeting during this period of time. When he saw this, Qiu Xianshu had left sensibly since a long time ago, and only Axiu and Chun Shi remained here. Just like in the past, Axiu wore a green dress and was beautiful. She had her hands behind her back as she feigned a relaxed expression while looking at Chan Shi and said, "I heard you're leaving?" Chun Shi nodded. "Yes, Axiu, I—" He was interrupted by Axiu before he could finish speaking. "Chan Shi, do you remember that you once promised to do something for me in the mortal dimension all those years ago?" Chun Shi was stunned. In his days, he recalled the scenes of the past in the mortal dimension. He recalled the scenes of him and Axiu strolling through the capital of delicacies, Taotai City. He recalled that scene where Axiu didn't hesitate to exhaust her cultivation and resist a strike from Saint Emperor Gue Sual for the sake of saving his life. He recalled, all of these scenes appeared vividly before his eyes, and they spread throughout Chan Shi's heart like a ripple. "Of course I do." Chan Shi spoke firmly, and he looked at Axiu with a clear gaze. "Good. Then this is that thing I want you to do." Axiu took a deep breath and seemed as if she'd made an extremely important decision. She withdrew a jade book and passed it to Chun Shi. After she finished doing all of this, she turned around and left swiftly. Chun Shi was stunned and didn't stop her. He flipped open the jade book in his hand, and there was only a single line of beautiful words on it. "When we meet next, I want you to do something in front of the entire world. Marry me." In an instant, Chun Shi was fiercely shocked in his heart, while various emotions surged into his heart like a tidal wave. It caused his hand that held the jade book to be unable to refrain from trembling, and he stared blankly ahead there in silence. "All right, I promise." Chun Shi didn't speak these words, and it was a silent proclamation. After he made this decision, his heart actually became calm. There were no emotions within his heart at all. There were no thoughts within his mind. It was an indescribable feeling of guilt and happiness. After a long time, Chun Shi carefully put the jade book away. He didn't tell Axiu that he intended to reveal all his true feelings in that first sentence he was prepared to say to her when they met on the next day within the world in the 9-continent divine cauldrons. Even though you're heading to the last day's domain this time, you can still take the Star Manor and 9-continent divine cauldrons with you. They're both divine artifacts, and they won't suffer rejection or destruction from the energy within the last day's domain. The tiny cauldron spoke with a voice that was flat as usual. However, Chun Shi discerned a trace of concern from within it, and he said, "There's no need. With my current cultivation, I already have no use for the Star Manor. As for the 9-continent divine cauldrons, it's better to be left for you to use." The last day's domain was an extremely dangerous and mysterious place. It was the source of the calamity that erupted in the 3 dimensions, and there was even a passageway that led to the ancient god domain hidden within it. Chun Shi's understanding of the last day's domain was merely limited to the fact that only existences at the god-rank realm could survive after entering it. On the other hand, this meant that once forces and treasures within the scope of the 3 dimensions entered the last day's domain, they would suffer rejection and destruction. For example, so long as any treasure that was beneath a divine artifact's in quality entered the last day's domain, it would lose all the might it originally possessed. In other words, Xianxia could only bring divine artifacts along as his weapons when he headed to the last day's domain. However, he wasn't worried about all of this. Presently, he already possessed the talisman armament, copper coin of treasurefall, and overarching heaven net that were divine artifacts with unfathomable might. On the other hand, the universe void lantern, 9 heaven life soil, and God-binding rope had originally belonged to Xianxia, and he'd returned them to her a long time ago. On the other hand, the other divine artifacts like Moonslaughter, the Firecloud Horsetail Whisk, and the Dark Calamity Sword which were obtained from Inhuaikong, Kong Zhao and Tua Kong, and all the other treasures he possessed like the Green Silk Palace Lantern, Heaven Hatred Seal, Sky Earth Gourd, and so on and so forth had been passed down to Fan Yunlan, Chen Hao, Chen and Chen Yu, Chen Nua and his others' loved ones instead. It could be said that when he decided to head to the last day's domain, Xianxia had already given all the treasures he already had no use of to his loved ones, whereas only a few divine artifacts remained in his possession. Since you've made your decision, then I won't force you, the tiny cauldron said. However, do you really intend to leave your clone in the 3 dimensions? Xianxia nodded. I can only be truly at ease with him here after I've left. Presently, Xianxia's clone had already attained the peak of the Saint Immortal realm, and it was only a step away from ascending into the ranks of Immortal Kings. Moreover, it would be a body refiner at the Immortal King realm. According to the tiny cauldron, if Xianxia's main body fused with his clone at this moment, then he would utterly no need to rely on a Tao fruit spirit to step into the God-rank realm in one go, light up the divine flame in his soul, and remodel an eternal body. His might would be so formidable that it was absolutely exceed Xianxia's imagination. However, Xianxia still refused in the end. Just as he'd said, he was unable to avoid worrying about the 3 dimensions, and he was even more unable to avoid worrying about his loved ones. Even though the 3 dimensions seemed to be at peace now, the calamity actually still hung above the sky in the universe. This was also an important reason behind this decision that he'd made. The tiny cauldron stopped persuading Xianxia when it noticed that Xianxia had made up his mind, and it said, however, you have to be careful. The last day's domain has already exceeded the scope of the 3 dimensions, and gods are no different than the ordinary people in the mortal dimension when they reside within it. Xianxia was stunned. He suddenly noticed that the tiny cauldron seemed to be slightly long-winded today. His tone seemed to be calm like water, yet it was actually thinking about him at all times. The tiny cauldron seemed to have noticed this as well, and it instantly stopped speaking and went silent after saying those words. After a long time, the tiny cauldron seemed to feel that the atmosphere was slightly strange, and it instantly became impatient. If you intend to leave, then leave. Why be so hesitant and garrulous like this? Quickly go. Xianxia smiled bitterly and said in his heart, from the beginning until the end, it seemed to have been you who was garrulous, right? Late at night, at the main hall of the Chun clan, Xianxia summoned all of his friends and loved ones here before holding a feast. Yet he didn't tell them about the news of his departure, because his clone would still remain within the 3 dimensions, so there was no need to let everyone know about this and worry about him. Only Xianxia, Fan Yunlan, Chen Hao, Chen and Chen Yu, and a few others were clearly aware of the objective Xianxia had for holding this feast, and the emotions in their hearts was rather complicated. After the feast ended, Xianxia silently left the world within the 9-continent divine cauldrons and returned to Tao Emperor Academy. He intended to cultivate in seclusion, step foot into the God-rank realm in one go, and then leave for the last day's domain. However, right before he entered into closed-door cultivation, Qiu Xianshu had arrived hastily, and he brought a jade box and a piece of unexpected news. Qiu Xianshu passed the jade box over first, and he said, Martial Uncle, this was sent over by the Nether Spring Grand Emperor in the Netherworld. He said that you've about to go on a long journey, and these 2 treasures ought to be returned to their original owner. Xianxia instantly understood that the Netherworld Register and Condemn Evil Brush were within the jade box. It's rare that he was still able to remember this. Xianxia took the jade box in his hand and sighed with emotion. He'd originally intended to seize the time he had in these next few days to return to the Netherworld, Yet this had saved him some time now. After all, the Netherworld Register and Condemn Evil Brush belonged to the third Netherworld Emperor, and they were branded with the inheritance of the Terminus Tao insight. He couldn't tolerate losing possession of such a forbidden force. Along with the improvement of Xianxia's cultivation now, he'd obtained deeper realization of how heaven-defying and formidable the Terminus Tao insight was. Once it was utilized, it was practically capable of annihilating existences that were said to be eternal. This naturally included gods. It was no wonder that the third Netherworld Emperor had been encircled and killed by all the gods all those years ago. The existence of the Terminus Tao insight was bound to make a great deal of people be unable to sleep at ease. "Isn't there some news as well?" Xianxia asked casually. Xianxia nodded and said, "Yes." As he spoke, he withdrew a jade slip and passed it over to Xianxia. A jade slip? Xianxia's brows raised as he utilized it, and his heart couldn't help but tighten when he saw its content clearly. Shockingly, this jade slip was left behind by Heaven Trampler. It roughly described that along with the eruption of the calamity in the three dimensions, his junior sister, Zhen Luqing, had already headed to the last day's domain under the lead of Taoist Dao Ke. As for Huangfu Qingying, Zhao Qinghe, Fourth Young Master Zhou, Ling Yu, Mortis, and the others, they were cultivating by Heaven Trampler's side instead, and they were unable to join Xianxia in a short period of time. Moreover, he specially noted that they were currently within a secret realm set up by Taoist Dao Ke, and that secret realm had been sealed up now in order to avoid suffering the assault of the calamity. This meant that unless this calamity ended, otherwise all of them, including Heaven Trampler, would have to stay within the secret realm. This was similar to the action taken by Nuwas Dao Palace. As soon as the gods had left, the Skanda world had been sealed up, and it was similarly for the sake of avoiding the assault of the calamity in the three dimensions. Xianxia couldn't help but feel dejected in his heart after he finished looking through all of this. Zhen Luqing and her master Taoist Dao Ke had already entered the last day's domain a step ahead of him, whereas Huangfu Qingying, Zhao Qinghe, Ling Yu, and the others were within a secret realm isolated from the world with Heaven Trampler. It seemed as if an unseen force was obstructing him from meeting his friends. Since he'd entered the immortal dimensions, he'd always missed the chance to meet them. From that day onwards, Xianxia started cultivating behind closed doors and charged towards the God rank realm. The God rank realm was similarly divided into various different realms. In these past few days, Xianxia had read through all the books that his fourth senior brother, the old scholar, had left behind, and he'd roughly gained an understanding towards the might possessed by existences at the God rank realm. Normally speaking, the God rank realm was only a general method of address, and according to his fourth senior brother, the old scholar, the known existences at the God rank realm within the three dimensions were roughly divided into three realms. They were respectively the World Enlightened True God realm, Domain Enlightened Spirit God realm, and Universe Enlightened Ancestral God realm. These three realms respectively possessed completely different energies. For example, the World Enlightened True God realm was the first realm after one stepped into the God rank realm. Attaining this realm was equivalent to establishing the undying divine flame, which was also called the eternal divine flame within the soul, and one would be able to control world energy. A Domain Enlightened Spirit God was completely different to a World Enlightened True God, and they'd established a divine altar of their own and grasped domain energy. Even further up was the Universe Enlightened Ancestral God realm, and it formed a universe of an era, allowing them to grasp universe energy. These realms had all appeared in the possession of the gods during the primeval times. For example, Xianxia's fourth senior brother, the old scholar, was a Domain Enlightened Spirit God that had grasped domain energy. However, even higher realms supposedly existed above these three realms, but those realms were already not something that his fourth senior brother could know of. For example, the fiend gods and living beings that were born from within the chaos, the master of Oracle Mountain, Fuxi, the master of Nuwas Dao Palace, Nuwa, and the sovereign sex master were existences that stood above these three realms. After he found out about all of this, Xianxia understood that strength within the three dimensions was indeed limited. Because inheritances and techniques related to the God rank realm were too scarce, like Qilin horns and phoenix feather. Only supreme powers like Oracle Mountain, Nuwas Dao Palace, and the sovereign sect had records of it. This obviously showed how difficult it was to advance into the God rank realm. At the very least, practically all the figures capable of becoming a god were overlords that were extremely rare in the world or shocking existences that were rarely seen in a million years. For example, when he was at the god attainment region, even with the ability possessed by the elite disciples of the sovereign sect Swearen Ting and Jiang Lingxiao, they could only place all their hopes of attaining the god rank realm onto the Tao fruit spirit. Unfortunately, because of Chun Shi's interference, they'd failed short of success in the end and missed the chance to attain the Tao and become a god. In short, existences at the god rank realm had already surpassed the 3 dimensions and weren't included within the 5 elements. The strength they possessed had already exceeded the scope of the 3 dimensions. Only in this way could they be addressed as paramount existences. In the opinion of all the living beings of the 3 dimensions, existences at the god rank realm could indeed be considered as paramount. However, becoming a god wasn't a difficult thing to Chun Shi any longer. It was even to the extent that he at least had 3 methods to step foot into the god rank realm now. The first was to rely on the Tao fruit spirit. The second was to fuse with his clone to create an eternal divine body and step foot into the god rank realm. As for the third method, it was simple, and it was to rely on his own cultivation and potential to break through into the god rank realm. The first 2 methods were capable of allowing Chun Shi to step foot into the god rank realm at any moment, whereas the last methods required Chun Shi to spend some time to comprehend it. However, it wasn't that difficult. Presently, he possessed the primeval Tao quintessence that only 1 in a million possessed, the inheritance of the infinite divine talisman, and a cultivation at the half-god realm. Coupled with the karmic luck he'd obtained from the divine chains of order, when all of these were combined together, it caused his potential and the strength he possessed to infinitely approach the strength of a true god since a long time ago. Under such circumstances, advancing into the god rank realm by relying on his own potential was something that would come naturally and occur without much extra effort. Thus, Chun Shi had chosen the third method to become a god. As for the Tao fruit spirits that he possessed, he'd pass them all to his clone to keep safe. Once Qing Shui, Fan Yunlan, Qiu Shenshu, and the others were charging into the god rank realm, his clone would give those Tao fruit spirits to them. In this way, the first 2 methods were excluded as well. Chun Shi had also done this because he hoped that he would be able to utilize his own strength to help the people by his side to the best of his ability, and he could be said to have given great care and thought towards all of this. On the 7th day after Chun Shi entered into closed-door cultivation, a strand of invisible and obscure force suddenly started rumbling, whereas his soul seemed like seething lava that brightly illuminated the entire universe within his body. Chun Shi could see that there seemed to be a strand of flames that was on the verge of leaping out from his soul. This was the act of lightening the divine flame within his soul. So long as he accomplished this step, Chun Shi would be able to establish the eternal divine flame and step foot into the ranks of world-enlightened true gods. At this moment, Chun Shi had a solemn expression while his entire body was enveloped by the aura of divinity, and he emanated a myriad of strands of auspicious light. Every single inch of his skin seemed as if it was spraying out the aura of divinity. Establish! Right when the energy of his soul had seethed to the limit, Chun Shi suddenly shouted loudly in his heart. Rumble! At this moment, the sky dimmed down outside the Tao Emperor Divine Palace while a vortex suddenly descended from the sky and covered it. The vortex rumbled while numerous strands of multicolored divine flames were emanated from within it. Crimson, violet, indigo, green. Divine flames of all sorts of colors seethed and emanated extremely terrifying might. Everyone within the academy was alarmed by this, and all of them successively stopped what they were doing and gazed over. All of them were astounded when they witnessed this scene, and they were extremely shocked in their hearts. Is the Dean about to step foot into the god rank realm? Many great figures had faintly guessed a certain possibility, and they gasped without end. As for those students beneath the immortal king realm, all of their Tao heart had almost been drowned out at this instant, and their minds went blank. Moreover, they were terrified by the divine might within that vortex to the point they almost knelt on the ground. This scene was too terrifying, because a type of paramount energy of divinity had descended from the sky and transformed into a revolving vortex, and its might was utterly not something that ordinary cultivators could resist. Swish! Swish! It wasn't long before another unexpected event occurred. The deathly silent door that stood towering above the sky in the entire universe seemed to have noticed something, and it suddenly started trembling. After that, numerous extremely thick and large divine chains of order rumbled as they descended in a dense mass. It was like a cage of the heaven Tao formed from a myriad of chains had descended, and it intended to restrain the variance within the three dimensions. Shit! If the Dean is disturbed at this moment, then he'll probably fail short of success. The expressions of Qiu Xianxia and the others changed abruptly, and they were extremely astounded. However, they were utterly powerless to stop anything, because with their current strengths, they were only barely able to resist the divine might in the heavens and the earth, and they even lacked the strength to attack. At this instant, all the cultivators in the 4,900 continents of the immortal dimension had successively noticed this scene. The door in the sky that has remained motionless and deathly silent has awakened once more, and it has sent down numerous divine chains of order. What does this mean? Could it be that the deathly silent calamity is going to sweep through the three dimensions once more? All living beings were shocked and at a loss for what to do. Swoosh! Right amidst this extremely oppressive atmosphere, a figure suddenly shot into the sky. His entire body emanated a myriad of strands of divine brilliance, and he was like an extremely blazing sun that was gradually rising in the entire immortal dimension and appeared in everyone's fields of vision. What's that? It seems to be the Dean of Tao Emperor Academy, Qian Shi. My God! What's he doing? The entire immortal dimension was stirred and filled with an endless uproar as they guessed the identity of that blazing figure. Bang! Before they could recover from their shock, they saw that blazing figure stretch out his hand and grab. The vortex that emanated countless strands of multicolored divine flames was instantly grabbed, and then it rumbled as it exploded into pieces. It transformed into a myriad of droplets of light that rained down from the sky, and it was completely absorbed into the body of that figure. At practically the exact same time, the dense mass of divine chains of order had descended, and they intended to cover that blazing figure. Humph! But right at this moment, that blazing figure suddenly raised his head and drew his sword with a clang before it swept out through the sky. An extremely breathtaking and boundlessly brilliant strand of sword chi swept out, causing a wave of world-shaking bangs to resound through the world. Under the astounded gazes of the myriad of living beings in the immortal dimension, the numerous divine chains of order were actually slashed apart successively and fell to the ground. With a single sword strike, the divine chains of order were easily slashed apart. When one watched this from the ground, it was like watching numerous thick and large black chains being slashed to death like snakes, and they fell successively to the ground. It was an extremely shocking scene. That was the might of the order of the heaven Tao. It represented a form of absolute control that looked down upon the three dimensions and caused all the myriad of living beings to not dare disrespect it. Yet now, it had actually been slashed into pieces by a single sword strike from Qian Shi. The entire immortal dimension was shocked. Early on, when the calamity had just descended, no matter where they hid, all the existences at the God-rank realm throughout the three dimensions were restrained by the divine chains of order and taken away by force, and they were unable to struggle at all. At that time, many people noticed such horrifying scenes. This caused them to arouse terror that came from the heart towards the calamity, and they felt that they could only await the arrival of death beneath this calamity because even the gods were helpless against it. But no one had imagined that on this very day, they'd simultaneously witnessed Qian Shi's figure soar into the sky and slash apart numerous divine chains of order with a single sword strike. Exactly what sort of terrifying cultivation did one have to possess in order to accomplish this? Right when everyone in the world was shocked, Qian Shi didn't stop at all and rose step by step into the sky. His entire body was suffused by blazing divine radiance, and the sword in his hand slashed successively as he charged all through the way. All the descending divine chains of order were successively slashed into pieces, and they were unable to obstruct Qian Shi's footsteps. Bang! 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 Wave after wave of world-shaking sounds of explosions resounded and surged through the 4,900 continents of the immortal dimension, and it was terrifying, like the sound of a heavenly drum being beaten. The dean is really going to leave? In Tao Emperor Academy, besides feeling shocked, all of the great figures there couldn't help but be extremely dazed, and they revealed a great deal of reluctance, yet none of them stopped Xianxia, because they were already clearly aware that Xianxia would leave sooner or later. He still had a long path ahead of him. He'd already stepped foot onto a height that the living beings in the 3 dimensions could only look up to, whereas the 3 dimensions were too small for him in the end. He only had a path towards the Tao by leaving the 3 dimensions and entering the ancient God domain. At this moment, Xianxia seemed to have become the center of attention in the entire immortal dimensions, and it was even to the extent that numerous gazes within the mortal dimension and netherworld were watching this scene. Shock, admiration, disbelief, all sorts of complicated emotions arose within them, and it caused all the living beings in the 3 dimensions to seem as if they were witnessing an unprecedented miracle occur before their very eyes. Everyone was clearly aware that the glorious era Xianxia represented might come to an end today. His glory, his reputation, his strength, his experiences, his legend, everything would be branded into records within the 3 dimensions to be revered through the ages. No one dared to guess if anyone within the 3 dimensions in the future would be capable of surpassing the various miracles Xianxia had created. But at the very least, everyone was clearly aware that throughout the boundless years of the past, if it was in terms of reputation, then amongst all of those praiseworthy and world-shocking figures that had appeared within the 3 dimensions in the past, only a small group of them were able to attain and even surpass the height Xianxia had achieved. Xianxia. This name was bound to become a brand within the 3 dimensions that was impossible to erase. Fellow Taoists, please take care of yourselves. See you again. In the sky. Xianxia's calm and indifferent voice resounded through the heavens and the earth. It reverberated throughout the 4,900 continents of the immortal dimension as if it was the voice of a god, and it didn't stop reverberating for a long time. Take care of yourself. Father, you must return. Dean, be at ease and seek your own path to the Tao. The 3 dimensions will be your strongest support in the future. At this moment, Xianxia's loved ones, the students and instructors of Tao Emperor Academy, and all the cultivators within the 3 dimensions gave Xianxia their blessings. The ancient God domain was where the gods resided, and it was an eternal place. A very, very long time ago, all the gods that were born from within the chaos, and those great figures that had stepped foot into the god-rank realm long ago had left the 3 dimensions successively. Now, Xianxia left the 3 dimensions as well. This was a form of supreme glory. At the same time, this was a type of completely new path. The path ahead was boundless and indistinct, and its dangers were unknown. Would Xianxia be able to successfully step foot into the God domain and ascend to the peak of the Grand Tao? Swish! A sword moved through layer upon layer of space and advanced ceaselessly. Xianxia sat cross-legged on the sword while his gaze swept the surroundings. After he entered the door in the sky, it was a boundless expanse of chaos that appeared within his field of vision, and it seemed to be without end. This is probably a spatial passageway, and it's completely obscure and filled with chaos. I wonder when I'll be able to arrive at the actual last day's domain. Xianxia withdrew his gaze and pondered deeply in his heart. After he entered this place, he didn't encounter any further danger all along the way. The atmosphere was deathly silent, and besides the sound of the sword tearing through the sky, there was no further sound in the surroundings. Those existences at the God-rank realm who were restrained had been brought into the last day's domain by force, so the situation there is definitely extremely dangerous. I wonder if my senior brothers and senior sisters have arrived safely at the ancient God domain. Xianxia took a deep breath and shook his head. I only hope that the passageway leading to the ancient God domain hasn't closed by the time I get there. The last day's domain was the source of the energy of calamity that erupted in the 3 dimensions, and it controlled the energy of the order of the Heaven Tao. During this period of time, it had restrained and taken away countless existences at the God-rank realm. All of this had predetermined that this was absolutely a place of great danger. It was even to the extent that Xianxia suspected that once those gods who'd been captured were unable to find the passageway that led to the ancient God domain, their lives would probably be lost in the last day's domain. Under such circumstances, Xianxia naturally didn't dare let his guard down. Xianxia's current cultivation had already advanced into the world-enlightened true God realm. He'd lit up the flame within his soul, and the energy in the universe within his body had been completely converted into practically translucent and obscure divinity. Such a strength was sufficient to look down upon and reign supreme through the entire three dimensions, but in the last day's domain, he would probably be reduced to the most ordinary existence. After all, it was a place where only the gods could arrive, and Xianxia had just stepped foot into the god rank realm. However, relying on his extremely deep foundation, this advancement into the god rank realm had allowed his strength to undergo an enormous transformation. At the very least, he was utterly unafraid of going against otherworld enlightened true gods. After all, when he was at the half-god realm, he'd annihilated Yin Huaikong, Kong Zhao, and Tuokong in one go, and they were true gods. Now he'd really stepped into the god rank realm, and the might he possessed had long since become something that ordinary existences at the god rank realm couldn't compare to at all. This wasn't the only benefit from advancing into the world-enlightened true god realm. For example, the divinity in the universe within Xianxia's body was so thick that it was similarly far from something other world-enlightened true gods could compare to. Especially the flame that he'd lit within his soul. It caused his entire soul to transform into a soul vortex, and a strand of eternal and translucent divine flames burned within the vortex and illuminated the entire universe within his body. On the other hand, the flames lit by ordinary world-enlightened true gods within their soul were far from being able to attain this. Most importantly, the surroundings of Xianxia's soul divine flame were enveloped by the Dao seal mark. This was something that otherworld enlightened true gods were absolutely unable to possess. The Dao seal mark came from within the river diagram fragments, and it had become a part of Xianxia's soul long ago. At that time, he wasn't aware of exactly what profound effects the Dao seal mark had. However, he was able to sense that so long as the Dao seal mark existed, then even if he was killed, his soul wouldn't be obliterated. In other words, the Dao seal mark was like an immovable armor that defended the surroundings of Xianxia's soul, and he didn't have to worry about any harm coming to his soul. Now when Xianxia lit his soul divine flame, the Dao seal mark had once more floated up into appearance, and it stopped hiding itself. It coiled around the surroundings of his soul divine flame instead, and it seethed with strands of obscure talisman markings and seemed to be gorgeous, yet mysterious. The existence of a soul divine flame meant that so long as the divine flame remained lit, then Xianxia could exist eternally. Similarly, because of the defense of the Dao seal mark, unless he encountered a huge unexpected event that was impossible to resist, otherwise his soul divine flame was bound to never be extinguished. Merely this alone was something that otherworld enlightened true gods were unable to compare to. Besides that, the immortal king Grand Dao Xianxia possessed had already undergone a transformation when Xianxia stepped foot into the god rank realm, and it had transformed into the energy of divine Dao laws. Divine Dao laws was the grand Dao profundities possessed by the gods. The path of cultivation started from the aura of the Dao, Dao insight laws, all heaven divine crests, Saint Dao laws, immortal king laws. All of them were a form of interpretation of the grand Dao profundities. This process could be taken as a process of grasping the grand Dao from a superficial level to a deeper level. On the other hand, the divine Dao laws were a type of grand Dao profundity above the immortal king laws, and it was a type of embodiment of the Dao that exceeded the scope of the three dimensions. It was also called the Dao of Gods. The Dao of Gods was divided into various different types. As it was said, there were 3,000 grand Daos and all were different. On the path of the divine Dao, some took the path of the five-element divine Dao, some took the path of the yin-yang divine Dao, some took the path of the tempest divine Dao, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, Xianxia was walking on the path of the talisman divine Dao. The grand Dao profundities of the five elements, Tai Chi, star obliteration, enduring, rise-fall, life and death, time, space, and various other grand Dao profundities were fused within his divine Dao. Could be said to contain everything and was filled with boundless profundities. On the other hand, the shocking transformations of his own cultivation, Dao insights, combat strength, soul, and so on and so forth allowed Xianxia to fully feel exactly how terrifying the might possessed by existences at the god rank realm was. They already possessed the supreme might to transform the ordinary into extraordinary and remodel the world. When Xianxia advanced into the god-rank realm and entered the door in the sky, a bright golden strand of divine light had suddenly lit up in a world outside the 3 dimensions that was covered in an expanse of boundless chaos. After that, this strand of golden divine light transformed into a mysterious and dignified scroll. It spread open and lay across the chaos, and one could clearly see that numerous brilliant names had surprisingly floated up into appearance on the surface of that scroll. These names formed numerous rows, and they were like bright pearls that were studded within the chaos. They emanated all sorts of different yet supreme imposing auras that were extremely impressive. Someone within the 3 dimensions has actually defied the heavens and become a god again. Suddenly, a mysterious eye appeared and stared at the golden scroll. That person's name is actually unable to be detected by the god rank chart. That mysterious eye suddenly focused and erupted with extremely powerful and terrifying divine radiance. It surged and seethed as the eye looked once more at the golden scroll. But in the end, it came back empty-handed, and it extremely unwillingly closed its eye before swiftly vanishing from within that boundless world that was filled with chaos. On the other hand, there was an indistinct name on the golden chart. It was completely different from the other names in the vicinity of it, and it caused others to be unable to clearly determine exactly what that name was. Later on, this name actually gradually vanished from the golden chart, and it seemed as if it had never appeared there,